Okay. All right, so 2 days delayed from January 16th. It is January 18th, currently about 6:05 PM. This is the regular meeting of the Common Council of the City of Oneonta, and we'll call this meeting to order. And if you call the roll, please.
Mayor Drenick,
Here.
Councilmember Murphy. Here. Councilmember McCune, Councilmember LaParishu. Here. Councilmember Preston.
Here.
Councilmember Harrington. Here. Councilmember Wood.
Here.
Councilmember Fountain.
All right, if you join me, please, in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you much. And just a little bit of bookkeeping before, or whatever it is, before we start the meeting. We are 2 days delayed from a meeting that we were going to have on Tuesday. Typically, we meet on the first and third Tuesdays, now at 6 PM. And one of the positives about our meeting on Tuesdays, first and third at 6 PM is we hopefully will have an opportunity to do a lot more discussed. Everybody will be more awake for that process, which is, I think, is a good thing. One of the negatives, though, is that we have a little less lead time in which to make a decision when there's a concern for a quorum. So, folks, what I like you to do is, as we move forward, I'm going to ask the council members, if you feel like you're not going to be able to attend a council meeting that day, and that you, or if you know days in advance, so much better. But that day, if you would inform Carrie by noon that day, if you feel like there's a likelihood that you will not be here. And if Carrie, if you wind up hearing from 2 or more people that there's going to be a concern for our being able to have a quorum, what I'm going to ask you to do, please, is she'll send out an email to everybody no later than 1 PM that day, letting you know that we have some concern for a quorum. So on council days, if you would just kind of be aware of your emails around that period of time, if you would, please. And then Carrie will send out that message. I would ask you to see if you can respond by 2 o'clock. And if you can do that, then for the benefit of all folks, it's so great to see everybody out here, it really is. So we want to be able to let the community know no later than 3 PM if there's been some issue that we've had to reschedule a meeting. So just at the top, yes, Scott.
Maybe instead of email, because sometimes where I'm at, I can't do email or text, but I actually ping my phone a lot quicker than I can get back to.
Let me just say that, Carrie, however we need to get a hold of folks, but those would be the timeframes that we'd like to work with. And if we don't hear from you one way, we'll ping you, or we'll lasso you, or in some fashion we'll get hold of you. Okay? But anyway, so that's the thing I want to take care of at the top. I appreciate, again, everybody's patience and flexibility in allowing us to convene a couple of days later. And I know there's a lot of interest in the community around any number of different things that the city is engaged in. I said I wanted an activated governance, and it looks like we've got it. So what I'd like to do is open the floor. There are no public hearings currently on tap. So what I'd like to do is open the floor to petitioners. So if you've got something that you'd like to talk about, see if you can hold this to about 3 minutes. That's typically enough to try to get your message out. Let us know who you are, where you reside. That's for the benefit of our meeting minutes. And with that, anybody that has, go ahead.
Michelle Osterhout, member of the fourth ward, very proud member of the fourth ward. First, I want to say I thank you all for your service to your constituents. I have it written down because I tend to be long-winded, so that'll give me another few minutes. On the heels of clear opposition of Stagecoach Coffee coming to Walnut Street, I'm concerned about the changes to the code that seem to try to make it easier for such an establishment to be approved. It feels like an attempt to redefine for the benefit of Stagecoach. In the proposed definition of neighborhood market, would Starbucks be allowed, Dunkin' Donuts, Duck Donuts, a bagel shop? If not, why not when coffee, tea, pastries, and sandwiches and other similar prepackaged foods are served in those establishments, those specialty stores? I think I can speak for many of my neighbors when I say we are looking also for a clear definition of specialty stores. as well.
Thank you much. Do we have somebody else who? Go, on, sir.
Michelle, can you send that to me so I have it? Thank you. Sorry.
You're all good. Have we anybody else who'd like to speak? Yes. Carolyn.
Carolyn Marks, 18 Brookline Parkway North. I'm just curious as to, again, on the heels of less than a month later, after the stagecoach issue, I would like to know who authorized Mr. Stephen Yearly to develop these neighborhood code market revisions and restaurant revisions. Who was responsible for authorizing this? Someone must be in charge. Who authorized Mr. Yearly? And also, in addition to that, could you demonstrate and show us where in his job description that is his responsibility?
So we have this as a discussion topic. Hopefully you'll be able to sit, stick around for a little bit as a discussion topic. In fact, I think it's the first discussion topic after our consent agenda. And I expect we'll have a fairly robust dialogue there. And I think that might wind up answered within the context of that.
Okay, well, that's my who. My why question is why? Why all of a sudden, less than 4 weeks after the stagecoach withdrawal, that this has been written and specifically have addressed in particular, in very detail, all of the concerns that the residents, roughly 200 people who signed a petition have, is so detailed compared to the rest of any other code in the city of Long Match.
Right. So similarly, we'll attack all of that.
And can you tell me when this happened?
Yes, it's right after the consent agenda. So it should be about 20 minutes. Sure. Anybody else that'd like to speak?
So just to clarify, we're able to talk again. This is not the only time we need to voice our.
Well, technically, per the agenda that we have here, no, but what I'd like to do is I have some prerogatives. They give me this ability to do some things. And so I think as we get to the end of our council meeting, we'll see who's still here and we'll open up the floor for maybe 10 or 15 minutes for comments based on what people have heard transpire during the meeting. Does that sound reasonable? Good. Okay, very good. All right. Anybody else? All right. Well, I thank you very much, and I expect many of you will be hanging around. This is just how we get people to hang around for meetings. So it's like it's teasers. We do have a presentation. I know a lot of people are interested in our re-envisioning of 27 Market Street in our partnership. Oh, I'm sorry, do I have something? Oh, correspondence. Do we have correspondence? We do, in fact.
You
have
do, and
correspondence.
that's why I wanted to make sure to mention it.
Okay, thank you.
So the council has received a letter from Hill City Celebrations, and they specifically asked that it be read to the council. You'll also find it in your packets, or digital packets online. I am writing you with some good news. I am the chair of the Hill City Celebrations Board, and we recently sponsored the Festival of Lights in Neola Park. I hope many of you drove through it. There is something about lights in this dark time of year that is so uplifting. We had over 40 community organizations and businesses that made displays to go along with the 16 that our group created. The park was magical. There were prizes donated by Climate Performance Partners, which allowed us to award first, second, and third place winners with money. Each winner was then given a matching amount to give to the charity of their choice. The city's Department of Public Works won first place for their magical display, and they chose the Swart Wilcox House as their charity to receive the matching $500. Enclosed, please find 2 checks in that amount. We would like the first prize money to go into the DPW line in the budget. The other check is, of course, for the Swart Wilcox House. We thank the city for their continued support for all of our events, particularly Lou Lansing, Chris Yakabuchi, and Jean Russell. Oneonta is a better place because of the work of so many people. Sincerely, Connie Herzig, Chair of the Board, Hill City Celebrations.
That's terrific. And so at our next meeting, we'll have a motion to accept that donation. So wonderful. Any other correspondence? Okay. All right, we have Denise, I believe there are seats. We have a presentation.
Christine's going to share her screen for the presentation.
She's
She is
on.
on Zoom. There she is.
Good evening, everyone.
Oh, you're good. Christine, welcome.
Thank you so much. Are
And
you-
I think most everybody here has gotten to know you, and without further introduction, I'll let you take it from here, okay?
Wonderful. I'm going to share my screen and get started with a PowerPoint. Is everyone able to hear me? Okay. Thank you. Okay. So thank you so much and good evening. I am joining you to provide some updates on the development of a collective vision for 27 Market Street. And as you can see, I am not with you. I am actually just starting a little vacation, and with the reschedule, I wanted to make sure I was able to join. So I've arrived, and thank you for allowing me to do this via Zoom. It's really important and essential that we can continue to converse about the progress we're making. So thank you to the council, but also thank you to the more than 60 individuals for your time, honest feedback, and great care each of you are taking during this community engagement phase. It's really in this moment we have our greatest ability to impact the financial strengthening of individuals, households, and the entire business community throughout Oneonta. We understand the urgency of this matter and are working alongside you to provide one strategy among many others being pursued. And I just realized I'm running the slides again. So to date, my direct engagement of over 60 individuals through Zoom, in-person meetings, tours, and group conversations provided a lot of ideas, concerns, valid ones, referrals to additional opportunities, and a pre-development framework. Additionally, we set up a website, 27marketstreet.com, to share information and invite community participation. I've spoken both with the Daily Star as well as the Town Square Media's This Week in Central New York radio program, where I've discussed the project and the community feedback that we're getting all along. So what have we heard so far? First, passion and enthusiasm for making 27 Market Street a true community asset. It's clear that people are really interested in the project and hopeful that it will contribute to a bright future and that it can be one of the many building blocks of a downtown renaissance. We've heard so many good ideas, provided a significant amount of information, answered lots of questions, and people have mostly been supportive, at least of the process of learning more about the project as a whole and having more discussions. We've also heard concerns from members of the community on a variety of topics: the impact of parking, the amount of the pilot payment, the use of the commercial space, and within the housing portion, the tenants and the project, and how those two things would work together to really serve and support all the individuals in the building, especially the ones that are already known to RSS. We've welcomed both the support and concerns, and we're pleased to have addressed the topics people have in the following manner. As of early this week, we've asked the architects to add 15 additional parking spots to the site for a total of 30 to be included in the design. And we're additionally committed to doing a parking study to really look at the impact of that and how that could really complement the downtown community. Next, around a fair pilot payment that we would negotiate, factoring in the infrastructure payments like water and sewer, we do believe the city would see increased revenue and reinvest in its services. We've had multiple suggestions on setting up maker space as the commercial portion, which would provide opportunities to existing Oneonta students and residents interested in learning new skills. For example, 3D printing, welding, pottery, anything with fiber arts, without having to go out and purchase those materials themselves. It's also a great place to bring community together, children learning new activities, a number of things. And so we've done a lot of research and worked with neighbors right there in Oneonta to understand this. We, of course, are not settling on that at this time. It's a really strong option, but we're open to entertaining other ideas as well. And regarding the tenants, we would utilize the right-sized rents between 30 and 70% of the area median income. 27 Market Street is situated in the Otsego County MSA, which is a grouping of areas for the purpose of assigning values to that region. So without going too deep into that, in 2023, the area median income, or AMI, in that area for a two-person household was $52,500. So if we apply the 30 to 70% of that number, it is actually reflective of the incomes people are seeking apartments with right-size rents in this area. And we have a market study that we've asked for to ensure that we are correct about that. This is the information we're getting. So to bring this to life, I would like to offer the following example. A single mom with one school-aged child working at SUNY Oneonta as an office assistant, which, by the way, is a vacant position as of early this week. I saw that listed online. The household income for that mom and child would be $34,152, which is under 50% of the area median income, making them eligible for a two-bedroom apartment in this proposed building. This would mean that this mom would pay between $900 and $1,000 towards their rent. This example reflects the salaries for a variety of currently available jobs, from restaurants, retail positions, other college positions, along with Bassett Healthcare. And with the right-sized rents, tenants in this property would have more disposable income to support the downtown business community, especially because it's right in their backyard. And for 30%, or approximately 15 of the proposed 50 households choosing to engage in support services, RSS is committed to providing the same level of high-quality, highly effective, individualized goal achievement supports that we've been delivering in Oneonta and Otsego County for more than 30 years. So we can get into much more detail, but to summarize, many of our discussions have been really positive and supportive. Where there have been concerns expressed, we have and continue to address them. And as this process has continued, we're encouraged by the interest, passion, and enthusiasm the community has expressed for the project. So this is only going to work if we have this collective vision for 27 Market, and we feel confident that we're generating that. So we are excited about moving forward. And a lot of people are asking, what is the timeline? What does this look like? When would construction happen? How would the property change hands from the city to the project going underway? So we've developed a high-level timeline here. You can see that we're already September, here we are in the winter of 2024, officially last Tuesday, I think, marked winter with the storm. And so we've accomplished all of those things we already talked about, community engagement. We're continuing that process. The next thing would be a purchase and sale agreement in the next month or so. That doesn't mean that RSS would then have the property we would own it. It would mean that we would come to an agreement about how much we're going to buy it for and what the process looks like moving forward in that way, which would bring us to the due diligence and design phase from the spring to summer of 2024, culminating that phase with an application submission to New York State Housing and Community Renewal. We wouldn't learn whether we had received that award or not until around January, so a year from now. And then you begin the process of making sure all of the construction, design, details, pricing, everything, all the contractors are in place. And once that happens, that gets us into the fall of 2025, winter of 2026 to complete construction. And then, as all people know, the lease up would take place once that construction was complete, which puts us into summer of 2026. So why is this timeline important? I wanted everyone to understand that this is a long game. Even magic wand thinking this could happen as quickly as we wanted it, that would mean that we're looking at completion summer of 2026. It is a long process. It also means that the current and existing parking lot, the way it's being used, would not change for quite some time, at which time other parking will have been developed. So I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I can stop sharing my screen and entertain some questions if that's helpful.
Thank you, Christine. Let me start with council. Len, did I just see your hand go up? Yes.
Christina, I first just want, I just wanted to, first off, I want to let you know that I truly appreciate the amount of time and effort that you've put into this. So I have a few questions I just wanted to ask you tonight, and you don't have to answer them on the fly. You can just write them down if you'd like.
Sure.
You had sent me an email earlier today telling me that the AMI was 52,250. So I just did some rough numbers. So that would mean folks that are making 30 to 70% of the AMI would make approximately at 30%, 15,675. If you took off the FICA, they should be in and around the 11,700, 11,800 mark. So less than $1,000 a month to live on. 50% would be 26,125. Again, that would be 18, roughly 6. And then 70% would be 36,575. Take off FICA, and that leaves you 27,431. You know, those aren't large salaries. And so, as I had expressed to you before, I've been listening to the community. I think Mr. Shaughnessy had sent you a detailed email, and the mayor has responded to that. He's not alone in that thought process. So I just want you to know that there's a lot of folks out there that are addressing those income and the ability to help support our downtown businesses and restaurants included. A couple other questions is you did answer the question of when did RSS need site control? You're saying a month and a half, so are you saying by the beginning of March this council needs to perform a site control analysis or paperwork for you?
So that is the ideal timing to come to an agreement where a purchase and sale agreement is settled on. And I know we understand site control to mean that it gives us the ability, if all the benchmarks are achieved, to get control of the site. I just want to make sure that the public understands that doesn't mean that we own it in the next month and a half. But yes, we would need to proceed in the next month and a half with that agreement and coming to some numbers around purchase price, et cetera, in order to meet the deadline of the August HCR application. That is correct.
Christine, if you don't mind, my other question is, does the occupancy of your structure affect your tax credits? Because after all, that is what you're going after, is the tax credits rather than public money.
So the occupancy affects the bottom line the same way it would affect any other building. So of course, you have to get it leased up in order for it to meet your operational budget, which is whether you have 2 units or 100 units or 1,000 units. So it would have an impact, but we have a demonstrated ability to market and lease up prior to it being available and going online.
And then when you and I had met and discussed, recognizing parking is an issue for downtown Oneonta, have your team given any more consideration to my idea of doing the first floor rather than a makerspace into paid parking?
Yes, so that was the intention of asking the architects to increase it to the 30 spots, and what would that do to that first floor? And then how does that impact zoning? What would we have to do? So we definitely are having them take a look at that.
But if this council came forward and said, well, geez, we really need to recognize we have 49 parking spaces currently, and would that be a deal breaker for you?
I think it's really about the site itself and how it can be designed to accommodate. If 47 was possible and not having to make the building just look like it's kind of floating on top, these are really good questions. So there's no deal breaker for me. It's just more questions to pursue the answers to.
Okay. And then I think the last question I had was, when the loss on Deed Street was formed, Mr. Carney told the city that we could select the actuators. So I believe we went through 2 actuators to come up with a pilot number. Are you in agreement to something similar to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a discussion, and I did leave with some homework, and I did invite you also, what is the number? What does it look like? How can this best work? And the structure of the pilot is also really relevant because there's different ways you can structure that pilot. So we, of course, would want to know what is the most helpful to the city, the way it's structured, the number, how we can get at that. And so there are no doors closed on any of these things you bring forward.
Okay. And and you did mention water and sewer earlier. We had, as a council, along with our director of finance, a month or so ago, talked about water, sewer, and approximately with like the loss on Deed Street, how much. But given your extensive past with RSS in the Albany, Troy, Schenectady area, can you get with us and just let us know on average what your apartments utilize for gallons for 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, so that
Yes.
we could actually understand what the revenue stream would be?
Yeah, we can get to that number for sure. I'm going to write that one down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anything else from council? Looking at you, no. Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Sir, can I speak from the audience?
Typically, that's not how the meeting works in order to keep the wheels on the bus here.
We're doing a public support.
Yes.
I'm supporting.
Yeah, no, it's not a question whether you support or not. So Denise, if you can give it a minute, yes, go ahead.
When you said anybody else, I thought you meant the audience. My misunderstanding.
That's fine, Denise.
Because I was in Albany a week ago, I contacted Christine because I'd spoken to her, and she showed me, walking and driving, many of the RSS projects. They are neat, clean, well-maintained, attractive, well-built. Unlike, in my personal opinion, Deed Street lot, which is hideous. They are careful, they are just well-maintained, and I support the project. And as you all may know, I'm a real cynic.
So you all good?
That's basically it.
Okay, as we've opened this up now, I'll entertain any other questions from the audience to Christine. And again, same scenario, if you just let us know for the purpose of our city clerks being able to document who it is that is speaking and where you might live. Is there anybody else with a question for Christine? Denise, you're it. Okay, well, thank you very much. All right, so Christine, thank you very much. And you are heading on vacation. Did I gather that?
I'm going to close my computer and my vacation starts.
All right, when do we expect you back?
Oh, I'll be back on Monday, and I will be back in
That's a
town
short
on
vacation.
Tuesday. And I welcome anyone, while we don't have additional vision sessions scheduled, I can schedule them very easily with small groups. I'll be in town and I look forward to having more and more conversations.
That'd be great. Thank you very much, Christine.
Thank you.
Enjoy your vacations. Christine.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. We'll move on now to our boards, commissions, and task forces. No presentation scheduled out of any, and on the website under 2024, we do have a couple of our boards and commissions have posted their minutes. If anybody has a question for any liaison, this would be the time. If not, we'll move on. Is there? No, then we'll move on to our committee reports. Let me tell the folks in the gallery what we're doing here too. We're hoping to generate a lot of really robust discussion with time investment that's getting to, you know, for instance, Carolyn, you were wondering, you know, what this is going to sound like and what it might look like. We want to be able to get past some of the stuff that has taken an awful lot of time and be able to move into a kind of a more fully dialogued section of the agenda. And I think you're going to find it interesting. And again, I appreciate the fact that folks are here. So that's also, you're also seeing a lot of computers and people kind of trying to figure out how to use them, how to log in and so forth. We're trying to save trees this year. So those large packets we've gotten rid of, and everybody just simply has the same agenda in your hands that you have, just by means of keeping you up to date on what we're doing. We are, however, entertaining committee reports, and for the committee report on the legislative committee, I'll turn to Councilmember Carson.
Thank you, Mayor. The Legislative Committee met January 8th of 2024. One of the items on our agenda was the nuisance fire alarm, and that is motions. I apologize for number 9. Fire Chief Knapp and Code Enforcement Officer Steve Yearly came before the committee and gave an explanation for the needs and the historical perspective, along with why the legislative package was put together. Any questions on that motion? I haven't seen anything. Yeah. And then we tabled the ethics board because we have some homework. We have Article 1 to read and study. We have Article 18 to read and study, and General Municipal Law sections 800 to 809 to study. We talked about the fee schedule, and that was also tabled for next month.
Okay, any comments, questions from council? Thank you very much, Councilmember Carson, which takes us now into our actual agenda of motions, and we will read the first, which is motion number 1, that the Common Council approves the warrants totaling $1,616,818.88, and the same be placed on the Director of Finance's desk for payment as presented. And this, as we're just reading this one, prior to the consent, I'll look for a motion to approve. Luke, followed by Katie. And unless there's discussion, then we will vote we'll take the vote.
Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh Russo. Councilmember LaPartio. Aye. Councilmember Carson.
Here.
Councilmember
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington. Councilmember Wooden.
Yes.
Councilmember. Aye.
Okay, and again, for everybody, normally we would read through motions 2 through I guess it's 8 in the consent agenda, and then we would ask folks to poll if they wanted to, et cetera, making a little bit less of a consent agenda that we hope it's in fact going to turn into. What we're not going to do then is the council has had an opportunity since Wednesday of last week to view all the various motions in the consent agenda, and if they had desire to pull anything, they would have done that in the course of 48 hours. It would have been moved to discussion. So while I won't read this, I will, because we said we'd do this two meetings before we moved into the final process. We'll provide you the opportunity, if there is in fact something that you want to pull, that you would do that. And the way we would do that, first, we're going to have a motion to approve the consent agenda. It'll hopefully be seconded before we move into a vote next time, maybe not this time. Before we moved into a vote next time, February 6th, one wanting to move something out of consent into discussion would actually have to make a motion to do that. That would need to be seconded and approved. Otherwise, it'll just continue on in the consent. The ideal being that because that process would be so laborious that we won't in fact be pursuing it. And in fact, that the consent agenda will be a consent agenda. We'll be moving on. For today, if there, I'll ask for any motions that might want to be, that you might want to pull. This is the last time we're going to do that. And if there are, we'll do that. We'll move them to discussion. So are there any motions of the consent agenda that you'd want to pull?
Can we just do an organizational, because I'm just trying to understand that. So you're saying that we have to identify which motions we want to pull prior to the meeting?
Yes, that's correct. On Wednesday, I don't know if you missed that.
No,
but-
I
Yeah,
read it.
so on the Wednesday prior, so we're moving the agendas up for delivery by 2 days.
Hmm.
So on the Wednesday prior to the council meeting, you'll see the full agenda, full consent agenda. Anything that's on that consent agenda that you'd like to have pulled for discussion, you would let us know prior to Friday. Did we determine a time on Friday? Noonish. And you'll let us know, so that gives you 48 hours to kind of determine that there's something that you'd want to pull. We'll move that then to discussion. Does that make sense?
So if we're gonna timestamp when I have to respond, are we timestamping when the agenda will actually come to us so that we all have a?
Yeah, I
consistent
think it's reasonable to expect that you'll see the agendas Wednesday early to mid-afternoon.
I mean, like, my goal is Wednesday at noon. Obviously, things come up during the day and change things. I mean, realistically, if we want to push that time that the agenda is finalized on Friday back to 2 p.m. or something, we can do that. We're just trying to make sure we get it out by before the end of the day.
Yeah, we want to give you 48 hours-ish to be able to make a determination as to, what you want to pull. And then as we move forward with that exercise becoming sort of muscle memory, then we will wind up with essentially a 3-minute operation around consent, and we'll be able to dive right into discussion, which I think will be a very valuable use of this council's time.
Don't misunderstand. I like the fact that you're trying something new,
Mhm.
especially starting at 6 and rather than 7 p.m.
Sure.
I'm just trying to get some clarity of,
You feeling like you got it now?
I got it.
Excellent. All right, so is there a motion to be pulled, and Luke, you have one?
It's the last chance.
It is the last chance.
Number 5.
Number 5. All right. Okay, yes, number 4.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we all good outside of those? All right, do I have a motion to approve those on the consent agenda minus 4 and 5? I've got Katie, followed by Len, and vote please.
Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Aye.
Councilmember LaPartie Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Wooden.
Yes.
Councilmember Falcon.
All right, so taking this in numerical order, let me look at motion number 4 first. Do I have a motion to approve? Len, followed by Emily, and Len, you pulled this motion?
Yes, I did. And so my only question is, when staff was writing up the agreement, or the city attorney was writing up the agreement, was there any discussion on creating some kind of a fee for the use of the city property? I mean, if I wanted to rent the armory, I would be charged. And so I was just wondering if that had been pushed out.
Yeah, no, we didn't discuss that in detail or really, go down that route. Just given the fact that the agreement since the early first part of the century had been to allow the use of the space underneath the parking garage. So we kind of were just looking to transfer the agreement over to the 27 Market parcel. And we've communicated with the haulers that in the future, if the city were to sell 27 Market Street parcel, there's obviously no guarantee that they continue to to use that space, they could negotiate with the new owner or find another area. So we've been having discussions with them about where that might be. But we did not discuss, charging for it just because we hadn't before, and we weren't looking to make changes right now, just trying to accommodate the fact that obviously the parking garage is gone, they can't be there anymore. We wanted to get it memorialized.
The other question I had, Greg, was the screening material. I didn't quite follow. Who's actually installing the screening material?
So that is one thing that was revised, and maybe I didn't get that updated version out, but there is no cage over there. That cage language about having fencing and all that
Okay, yeah.
was copied and pasted from the other location. There isn't a cage there, so that really isn't applicable. But they are still responsible for cleaning around the area and maintaining that, the haulers themselves.
Well, we make our commercial businesses, correct me if I'm wrong, right? We make them screen their dumpsters, right? I'm looking at Steven. So our property owners, don't we make?
Yeah,
them
so I
screen?
mean, technically, if they're visible from the right of way, the new updated code for downtown requires that. Pre-existing dumpsters that predate that code, they were just kind of grandfathered in.
Right.
I viewed this dumpster situation as a temporary accommodation that was not going to be permanent installation.
Right.
So, I mean, if the city wants to screen dumpsters, we can screen dumpsters. I would encourage that. I'd be very happy.
Well, I would encourage it also. I mean, not just do as we say, but do as we actually lead the
Want
way.
people to do.
Well, so I would like to see us actually create a monetary amount for the use of the land. I do give the example of if I rented one of the baseball fields or I rented one of the armory, I would be charged for that. And so, and also the language of screening it. I would like them to pay for the screening since this is a benefit to them and not to taxpayers as a whole. Because that's our fiduciary responsibilities to the taxpayers as a whole. And then, I was also a little concerned about the language of the exit, and I didn't know if David wanted to get in on that one either, but, given the timeline that Christine, even if this council doesn't approve that, it seemed a little vague, and did you really want it to be that way, David, to exit out of that?
Well, what specifically referring?
So I didn't see, was there an actual days, like, was there 90 or 120 days? Because
30.
Yeah.
Thirty.
Yeah, it was a limit.
Okay. So I mean,
Then either party can.
right, but we're actually trying to encourage those property owners on Water Street to create their own space now, right? I mean, the long-term answer to this is that they have to create some kind of area on their property for their refuge.
Or another centralized location if they
Or
have an
another
agreement to be at.
But this space is not gonna be long-term.
Not the city, if the city presumably sells the parcel eventually.
And we're not gonna do this again where the parking garage is coming down. So 47 Market, we're not gonna entertain this on 47 Market.
Correct.
So those are the conversations that's been had between the city staff and the building owners saying,
Well, we've had that conversation with Casella and Logan's, the haulers. Presumably they are having those conversations with their customers, whoever they are, because we don't have the list of their customers. Obviously, it's the nearby building owners, but not sure exactly whose customer.
I just know that I've had a face-to-face discussion with one of the property managers of one of those buildings. And, it seems like it's thought upon because it's been going on for so long that it's our responsibility to provide space for their refuge, and it's not our responsibility. So I would just like, is it city staff or elected officials that need to have that conversation with the property owners? I don't, Mayor, if you wanted to do what your thoughts were, but.
Well, I don't think there's any reason that the property owners wouldn't have that there wouldn't be a conversation with the property owners, so easily do that.
We did when we had a pre-construction meeting with Water Street area property owners regarding the Transit Hub parking garage demolition project. We explained this scenario, that this is going away, and it's something that ultimately long-term is their responsibility and the haulers to figure out. We have a list of all those property owners, Nixle, that we could send out an update as a reminder that, by the way, this is not a situation or a location that's coming back to the eventual parking lot.
Mhm.
And you can follow up directly if you wanted to.
And then, did you want council to respond on a fee or?
Since I was, I presumably am the only one in this room who was around in city government when this was established. What had happened was that there was tremendous amounts of garbage, infestation, filth all over Water Street. And so this was done by the council in a manner to provide for better site review all along Water Street and to make it more inviting for users. Because the property owner said, we can't do this, we don't have the ability to do it. If you're gonna start citing us, then we're the people who are generating traffic downtown and you're doing nothing to help us.
Mhm.
So this was done as a way to provide a solution to a very messy problem. That then created unintended consequences, of which this council may be more familiar, where what was happening was a lot of things being dumped there, people were bringing in things from apartments, and it was just not being maintained. Theoretically, what this will do is we'll put the burden, instead of us trying through code enforcement, go after particular property owners who said, well, I didn't put that stuff there. Somebody else put it there, and they said, well, why don't you put up cameras and catch people and enforce it? And it becomes very difficult for the city to enforce. This was a way that we would put the burden for the maintenance of both the dumpster area and the cleanup and the problem itself on the people who are making money from doing so with the haulers. So there's no, I'm concerned about saying, okay, and now we're going to charge you for this. And what if they say no? So are they going to put the dumpsters behind the buildings again, and we're going to start that process all over again?
Mhm.
So all I'm saying is that this is a situation where the pendulum swings back and forth. And that may be something we want to do long term, but I'm a little concerned that this is going to be something that's going to happen for the next year or so. If it doesn't work, this council or anybody can terminate on 30 days notice.
Right.
So saying that we're not going to do this now, we're going to change it, and we're going to start charging them. And what if 3 say yes and 5 say no? And then you get people in here saying, well, where are you going to put our dumpsters? And what are you going to do? Are you going to lock them up? And what if we don't? What are you going to do? We just dump the garbage behind our building. You're going to enforce it? How do you prove it's our garbage? Enforcement from the outside becomes very difficult, and this is a way to make the current people that are there comply, and the people that they are paying for the service to be the ones responsible for cleanup on a regular basis. So that's the part of the thinking. It just sometimes the doing it in a consolidated way is better than trying to fragment it. Because again, getting coordination between all the landlords in downtown Oneonta who own the buildings is generally difficult. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I do, and I hear what you're saying, but that is the question for me is, what are you gonna do with your garbage? Because it's not the city's responsibility, as you just clearly communicated 30 years ago to today. It's still not our responsibility about their garbage. So I'm asking that we actually have that conversation with the 7 to 9 building owners that are there, have that conversation with them and saying, what are you going to do with your garbage? Because this is not a long-term solution. You're literally closer to the end of this opportunity than the beginning.
It's a political decision. I just wanted to know what the history of it was and how we got to this point.
I understand.
So it is a conversation that I can have in the next couple of weeks prior to the February 6th meeting ideally, and bring back to council.
But I would like to make a friendly amendment to this motion that the screening material be installed and be on the cost of those that are using it.
Just need a second.
And just note that the motion that was pulled was number 4, number 3 was approved already with the consent agenda. So motion 4 is applicable to Logan's. Motion 3 is applicable to Casella. Good. That's another motion. I pass another motion.
I could make a motion. As an addendum to 3, I'm sorry,
The motion for those of you who did the parliamentary thing, it would be a motion to reconsider.
motion to reconsider on motion number 3.
Hmm.
It's a lot of motions.
Yeah, if I could ask a practical question, is that if we're working on an agreement, and what happens if they say, no, we're not gonna pay for it, or 3 say they're gonna pay for it, and 4 say they're not gonna pay for it, then do we deny the entire thing and no one does it?
All I'm saying is that we have a rule, a law that says that if you own property and you have a dumpster and it's in this location on your property, you have to have it screened in. I think we meet that definition. The code enforcement officer can say no to it, but it looks like he's saying, yes, it meets the definition, because I can see it from the right of way. Then we need to have that screened in.
No, I'm talking about payment. If 4 say they're willing to contribute, 3 say they're not.
We're
then
dealing
it's
with the
a
2
void or it's
haulers,
not.
David. We're dealing with the 2 haulers. We're not dealing with the 7 to 9 building owners. We're dealing with the haulers. So our agreement is with the haulers. So if they want to continue making money,
So the haulers would be the one who would pay for it.
the haulers are responsible for cleaning up the garbage.
I'm talking about paying for the enclosure.
I understand that, yes. That's my point is, yes, the haulers are whom we're communicating with right now.
I just need to know.
I just think if we're gonna make a rule, we should live by it.
So what is your,
Well, first of all, you've got a motion. You have a motion for number 4. It's been made and seconded. You're in discussion.
Mhm.
You either vote that up, vote it down, do whatever you want with it before you go on to anything else.
Then you said friendly amendment, so we have to, a second for the friendly amendment.
right,
You have to
with,
decide whether it's a friendly amendment or not, whether there's consensus among the council to amend that, or whether in fact there has to be a vote on the motion to amend. It's in the absence of consent by everyone. There's no such thing as a friendly amendment, so it's consensus by the council as a whole.
right? So you're saying we don't need a second on that friendly amendment, we just simply need to poll the
It's in the
council.
motion and the second in this discussion
For number 4.
for number 3.
Mhm.
So now what's happening is that Len says he wants to make a friendly amendment.
Right,
The only way you can have a friendly amendment is with consensus of the council.
Right.
If there's consensus to make a friendly amendment, then there can be a consensus to make a friendly amendment, then you have to vote on it.
all right, well, I guess then the question is, do we have a consensus of the council?
I'm not opposed to that, but I'm trying to understand, I'm just pulling up the code for the screening to understand what type of expense we're going to be asking them to put in. And yeah, it's something to consider because it's our property and I'm following your thinking and I don't disagree with it. But it's our property, so are we asking them to make an alteration to our property? Or are we asking them to maintain their dumpsters within the standard that's outlined in the contract and code and not create a public nuisance? You know, do we want to take it a step further and ask them to install like fencing, I'm assuming?
As simple as 4 posts that allow the gate in the front, 2 gates, right? And 2 other poles. Because you gotta have full access to the 4 dumpsters that the picture showed. So you would have a gate that would, 2 doors that would open wide open, so you're talking about 4 posts. You're talking about metal fence, you know, the chain link fence. And you can put, a good example is on Chestnut Street, they have, what is it, bamboo or whatever like that material is, just, it fills in. And it actually,
So just to clarify, you cannot change. That's,
you can't,
Okay,
no,
yeah, so
it'd
that's
have to
what
be
I
painted wood.
have
have
to be
to
what?
what?
Painted wood or another product like it, like something that looks like, I mean, you could theoretically use like a,
Stockade fence.
yeah. As long as it's finished, it has to be finished.
Mhm.
So, yeah, you could use like a pallet. But we moved away from chain. I guess you could screen chain, but that would kind of defeat the purpose of the screening.
You don't want to like our vote when required, like posters.
They gave us a.
Can I get it here?
Please.
Now, we're getting far afield of whether there's a consensus on a friendly amendment. It appears that there's not a consensus on a friendly amendment. I would suggest that you vote that if Len wants to amend the motion, have him amend the motion and have a vote on the amendment. then you can vote on the original motion. If there's gonna be amendment, then Len should make the motion to amend, and then have a vote on whether you're gonna amend the motion.
I just don't feel like I have enough information to know whether I agree with the amendment.
Well, there hasn't been an amendment yet, so.
Right. Do you want
You may or may not have enough
to
information.
construct
to do it.
something as an amendment?
I would like to see the area that's been prescribed to be screened in to eliminate the view shed of the dumpsters from the right of way as per our own code.
So that's the amendment. And do we have a second on that? All right, so Scott's second.
With the addition of at the hauler's expense. or-
Yes, with the addition of at the hauler's expense.
Now is there a discussion on the amendment?
And
Oh, okay. Okay. Luke, you raise a good question. I wanna look at the map.
Laptop. It's basically 4 dumpsters. That's what they showed us on a diagram.
No, I saw. Okay.
And this is something that could be potentially there for another, if we even agree to that timetable.
Year and a half anyway.
A year and a half to 2 years,
Yeah.
so. I'm also concerned that, to David's point, because I do remember when the dumpsters were on Water Street, that they'll be just start piling stuff up by the dumpsters, so. I'd like a defined area, because I don't wanna have a conversation with, the dumps, or the haulers. 6 months down the road saying, well, a mattress that was located 25 feet away from the dumpsters isn't their responsibility. We define the area, then it's their responsibility.
Anything outside the fence would then be
Potentially,
clearly not their
yeah.
responsibility,
Mhm.
which was the issue on Water Street. That was the issue on Water Street. Anything
Right.
outside the fence was left and we had to pick it up.
I mean, it does say that that they need to create a caged area, so that's not in question. What you're saying is at whose expense?
Yeah, you said it should be at the city expense.
It shouldn't be for the taxpayers.
I-
Benefit all the taxpayers.
Can I ask a practical
Yes,
question?
go.
We're looking at negotiating with 2 haulers over this, so we have to define how they're going to split it, because they won't, I'm assuming we won't have 2 separate caged areas for dumpsters, or will we?
Right.
The diagram shows all 4 dumpsters together in the back left corner.
That's what I thought. So they're both responsible.
For this area. The language between the 2 agreements was exactly the same except for the name.
Right. But I'm saying, we're leaving it up to them to negotiate whose responsibility is whose in terms of constructing and maintaining this? Is there 2 separate agreements? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Playing devil's advocate, what happens if one says yes and one says no? Come back.
They need to go back to the dumpsters.
Right, they wouldn't agree to the contract. so-
Right.
So.
Okay, so we have the amendment, the amended motion seconded. Our discussion seems like we're getting to a place with it. Is there any further discussion on this? Have we more or less gotten to a place where we can vote?
You're voting on the amendment.
On the amendment, yes.
Okay, so we're voting on whether or not we will amend. the
Correct.
motion. Okay,
Yes.
thank
You're
you.
not voting on the motion, you're voting on the amendment.
Right, right.
Okay,
So, and this is that consensus that we'll take by way of a vote. And if we, start with
Wait,
Luke.
can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. If we were to fund this, which I assume was the intent,
No, the intent was for the city to spend $0 on this.
Okay.
For the dumpsters to be stored in the corner, where
Okay.
they are currently. Just have an agreement in place that allows for them.
okay, but it says in the contract that these will be caged, so someone has to buy, someone has to purchase.
Right, the caged language, the use of caged was a carryover from the original agreement
Gotcha.
where there was a cage underneath the
Right,
parking garage.
I remember that.
There had not been a discussion with the haulers about constructing a new cage at the new location.
Okay, gotcha.
So that'll be a new discussion with them.
Okay, is that one,
Presume that's inferred though. Right.
right, okay, so we are anticipating that the haulers will have to. I guess what the intent of the contract is that the haulers will do it, so this is just
I
codified.
think that's an accurate assessment. too.
Okay, then I would support that.
All right, so
She's explaining.
Yeah, we'll have to have that conversation with them. They'll have to agree. If they don't
Right.
sign, then again, we'll have
Explaining to them why-
whatever issues come from it.
Yeah, okay.
Could be bigger issues.
Cool, thank you, Greg.
See when that happens.
all right, so we are now,
Yeah.
we're now ready to vote on the amendment to the motion. And so let's start with Luke.
Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Yes.
Councilmember LaParsha.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Wooden.
Yes.
Councilmember Falco.
Aye.
Okay, so now the motion is amended and we still have the motion on the floor, correct? And at this point,
It's amended.
it's the amended motion is now on the floor in front of all of us, and we can either continue our discussion, although I would suspect that we're probably done with that. And unless there's more discussion, we'll call a vote.
Oh.
Yes,
Question with, because we've been specifically talking about motion number 4, this amendment will also apply to motion
It
number.
will not.
No.
You're gonna-
you'll have
We're gonna have,
go through the process again.
okay, okay,
But at least we
All right.
we know that we have the breadcrumb trail on this.
okay, all right, okay. Ready.
All right, so with that, we.
Do it's in here in the corner.
No, it's all good, man. So I believe that there is then no more discussion outside of just that question of that point, and so we'll call the roll.
Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Yes.
Councilmember LaParsha.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Wooden.
Yes.
Councilmember Falco.
All right, so before we get into motion number 5 that we pulled, we're gonna need to reconsider the motion number 3, correct?
I move to reconsider motion.
I second.
Well, I believe they do want to do that, yes. So I'm just getting my yeses and no from you, Dave. So we've got Emily, I'm sorry, we've got Katie followed by Len, and we'll need an amendment that looks an awful lot like the last one.
No, you
No
have,
need?
you have to approve the
Yeah,
reconsideration.
approve reconsideration.
Oh my
first.
gosh, okay. All right, so I doubt that we need discussion. I'm gonna ask folks to take a vote on,
Consent agenda.
I know.
I was thinking that. Yeah, Councilmember Murphy.
Yeah, aye.
Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Yes.
Councilmember LaParsha.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington. Councilmember Wooden.
Yes.
Councilmember Falco.
okay, now that we've done that, now we are looking for an amendment that looks an awful lot like the First Amendment.
Except it's not an amendment, it's a motion. You know,
Amendment to the, oh my God, that's right. So we go back into our motion. Number 3, do I have a motion to approve? Len followed by Scott. And now,
Need a motion to amend it.
who'd like
I'd
to,
like to make a motion to amend motion number 3.
all right. And do you want to read that?
Area prescribed to be screened to eliminate the view ship as per code. At haulers.
Okay, do we have a second? That was Scott, I'm gonna say. And do we have discussion on the amending of the motion? No. So we'll vote on the amending of the motion.
Councilmember Murphy. Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Yes.
Councilmember LaParsha.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington. Councilmember Wooden.
Yes.
Councilmember Falco.
Okay, so now we are looking at the motion is on the floor. It's been seconded, correct?
Amendment.
Yes, the amended motion is on the floor.
Motion to amend. as
And
amended.
if we have discussion, this would be the place to have it. If we don't, we could probably take a vote. Any discussion? Let's take a vote.
Councilmember Murphy. Aye. Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Yes.
Councilmember LaParche.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Wood.
Yes.
Councilmember Falcon.
The
Okay.
amendment, This hadn't been on the consent agenda?
Yeah, I know, right? Let's talk about through the looking glass. All right, so now we have motion number 5 that was pulled. And do I have a motion to approve? Emily, followed by Len, I'm gonna say, and Luke, you're the one who pulled this?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the email. So we received an email that I thought made a good point about, the sale of, city timber, or timber within the city. And the quote being used was the funds raised from timber harvest to be used to help fund plant new trees and remove hazardous trees for the city. I don't have, I know the environmental board worked on a sustainability plan. Is it the intention that the new trees being planted, I have no way to make them in my yard, they're invasive, they do choke out, from what I understand, a lot of the indigenous trees, particularly sugar maples, which are, very, important. Is it the intention that these funds be used for, indigenous tree species, or species that we aren't quite as invasive?
Right, Greg, can you talk to that?
I can't say that they are, we have an approved street tree list for the city. I can't list those right now off the top of my head and whether they're indigenous or
No way,
otherwise.
maybe
They're,
it's not unless I can guarantee.
yeah, they're certainly not invasive. But that's something that our certified arborist consultant, Fred Hathaway, helped us develop and update. So we can review that, certainly maybe with the environmental board if they would like. But we do have a list that's approved, so it's not just potentially invasive trees. We're not planting Japanese knotwood. or anything like that, you know, hopefully.
And thank you, Luke. Any further discussion beyond Luke's question here? All right, well, then let's take a vote.
Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh Russo. Yes. Councilmember LaParche. Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington. Councilmember Wood.
Yes.
Councilmember Falcon. Aye.
Well, that certainly sped everything right along, didn't it? We'll look at now we're moving from the consent agenda to our discussion agenda, motion number 9, which I will read. Motion that the common council approves an ordinance establishing chapter 280 of the City of Oneonta Municipal Code entitled Unnecessary Alarm. This ordinance was laid electronically on January 8th, 2024. Do I have a motion to approve? Len, followed by Katie. Do I have discussion?
Someone asked for before, apparently it was late.
You're all good.
So I apologize, Greg.
All right, you got it before Carrie sent it out. Barely.
So just a couple of quick questions is, this is only to the ones with the alarms in the city. We have a town contract and we're talking to the town about doing the same thing in the town. So this is gonna work together, that the town will be.
Assuming that they pass a statute consistent with ours.
Okay. And then the other one is it per site or is it per building on the site? Because, you know, we do have a lot of big sites that have multiple buildings.
Yeah, it's parcel. So if you have one parcel that has 4 buildings and they have a fire alarm 7 times in one day, you would be triggering this ordinance.
Most of the properties of the type that you have consistent problems with, they're either individual residents or they're ones where they're hardwired. Our code requires hardwiring, so that when an alarm goes off in one, it goes off in all, so that one entry doesn't get an alarm, but the rest of the building doesn't. So false alarms are the type that we're normally talking about. If it's a multi-unit, like 10 apartment, they're all hardwired. So if one goes off, they all go. So I think that addresses your concerns. I mean, what is your particular concern?
Well, I was like, say we had a site that had, say, 12 buildings on it, but the amount, the 12 buildings are all separate buildings on that site. But it's all under one property.
Yes.
So it's all that property.
Right.
So it doesn't matter like what the building is inside there, if they have two.
Yeah, the idea is to get away from like kind of an arbitrary, where we're like, well. The fire department responded to this site 8 times in one day, but it was 8 different buildings, so that's somehow safer than. If they responded to one building 8 times in one day, I mean, it's to address the idea that the fire department is being dispatched unnecessarily repeatedly to one site. I mean, that's the goal here, is to reduce the number of calls the fire department is going to. That there's nothing actually wrong, or there's no reason for the alarm to be triggered. And if you look in the ordinance, there's exceptions for like maintenance work, we call them act of God, but you know, events where lightning strikes a building, like earthquake, tornado, windstorm. And then there's also kind of a catch-all where the fire captain on duty can assess the situation and send a written report stating, we responded to this, it wasn't an unnecessary alarm because blank. They fill in the blank, they explain why, it kind of doesn't count. So there is flexibility within the ordinance, but the idea is to prevent the fire department from being repeatedly dispatched for no reason.
Right.
Which costs the city, the taxpayers money, it puts stress on the fire department, it puts stress on our equipment. It's not like a way to just go, we're not going out.
Right, no, I get that, but I just think if you have the same issue going on in town. With our fire department out there, I still think it's fair across. You gotta try to show it fair across the board. So I think really with town.
That's why we're discussing it with them. Again, we can't legislate,
Right,
we can't legislate in the town, but we're discussing it with them to get one parallels, we run into the same issue.
yeah, I just wanna make sure. Okay.
Appreciate that. Further discussion? All right, let's take a vote.
Councilmember Murphy. Aye. Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Yes.
Councilmember LaFarge Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington.
I have this.
Yes.
Councilmember Fountain.
Aye.
All right, very good. All right, we want to bring you up to date on the city prosecutor's position. We are going to be losing our city prosecutor, Don Schwartz, on January 31st. And we've been scrambling to try to figure out how we were going to move from where we are to where we need to be. You've all received some correspondences. Thank you very much, Chief. And Greg, you sent some out as well. I think everybody's probably had an opportunity to look at that. But Greg, if I could just ask you to just kind of bring people, just give them the overview.
Sure. So our city code requires or lists the city prosecutor as a city officer, and per definition in the city code, a city officer must be a resident of the city. Historically, it's been difficult to fill the city prosecutor position with a city resident who is interested and qualified in the position. Don fortunately was the last time around. This time around, we've not yet identified anyone who is a city resident who is interested in the position. So that is one consideration. Another consideration that I'll let Chief Witzenberg jump in and talk about is the close working relationship that is very beneficial to have between the county DA's office and the city prosecutor. And past iterations of city prosecutors have had that relationship, and it's really beneficial both to the city, the police department, and the DA's office. So similar, I look at this similar to how the city entered an intermunicipal agreement with the county a couple of years ago to have the county assessor's office provide assessor services to the city. We named an individual who works for the county assessor office as the city assessor. And through that intermunicipal agreement, the county is providing the service and the city is paying the county for it. We'd look to do a similar thing with this, having the DA's office provide the city prosecutor. That individual will be an employee of the DA's office. They'd be named the city prosecutor and would provide those services. So I don't know, Chief, if you want to jump in just a little bit of your perspective on that.
I think I laid out a little bit in the correspondence with you about former prosecutor Getman, now Superior Court Judge Getman, and his long tenure, 16 years with the city of Oneonta as prosecutor. During that period of time, he had a dual role and filled as the chief assistant district attorney for the county, which was a separate position. Now, they were never fused before. And when he left, it left a gigantic void in our ability to communicate directly with, or have cases brought forth to the district attorney that might be matter of interest for that office. We average over 500 arrests a year in the city court, not including prosecutions for traffic tickets. So it's a very busy position. We also have a significant amount of felony arrests and cases that are arraigned in city court that have to then be transferred up to the district attorney's office. Having a city prosecutor that's also affiliated with the district attorney's office allows the prosecutor some ability to handle some of the cases that go up to the county court, at least make sure that they're more completely vetted before being transferred to the district attorney's office. When we lost that, it became apparent very quickly through discovery reforms and other issues that caused backlog that we were missing something critical. This provides us with an intermunicipal agreement where we join with the district attorney's office, who would be able to work with the assistant district attorney / city prosecutor, and provide them with some guidance and support in handling of those cases to adjudication.
Is that clear for everybody? Yeah, so we are making some very good progress. And I would suspect that when we get together on February 6th, we'll have something that will even be beyond information, even potentially motionable. So, but the good news is that in fact we are making progress. And so if no one's got any further questions on that, then I'm going to, before we go into the, yes.
Just wanted to thank the chief. I appreciate the memo you sent out. It was really informative. I spent some time looking over it, so thank you.
Right.
Yeah, you're welcome. I wanted to make sure that you had a pretty clear idea of what it was.
Yeah, it was very, very, very clear. Thank you, Chief. Yes. Len.
Do you want to talk about the timeline of try to make this work? It looks like we have consensus that the council wants to move forward, but
Well, we're going to need an interim. Yeah, we'll need to have the agreement in place. We have the agreement in place, then we can talk about what this council is going to need to do relative to a waiver, because that's, you know, going to wind up a requirement. And then we're very lucky that our district attorney is as committed as he is. He is going to take on the caseload as needs be over the course of what we hope would only be a couple of weeks. And so we're seeing a much quicker bit of progress toward a resolution than we could have ever anticipated. So you know, this is, everything is, you know, kind of going the way we want it to go right now. So again, at February 6th, I think we should have something, certainly much more information to share that's substantive and potentially emotional action. Yes.
so we could actually pass this before we codify the code.
Excuse me, sorry. The code wouldn't have to be changed. The charter allows for a waiver of the residency requirement with a resolution by the council. So.
Okay. So with that, so folks, you are gathering that what we're doing here now in the beginning of 2024 is kind of reimagining our council meetings to engage much more in sort of a deeper dialogue and strategy around so many things that are important to folks. But one of the real benefits of this new construct is we're hoping to have a lot more engagement of the community as well in our council meetings. So I have some leeway, as I said, in this role. And so while we don't want to have a dialogue necessarily, because we are hoping to have meetings that are actually shorter than some of these marathons that we've had, we do want, I think, in certain cases, it's going to make a lot of sense to get some input from, in terms of comments from the folks in attendance. And so while we had our opening, petitioners section, typically we don't do more, but as I hinted, I think will here. We're going to be, because this is clearly a hot button for a lot of folks, I think, in attendance. We're going to have our council discussion around this zoning code neighborhoods markets piece. And we'll have the discussion. It will be, I think, robust. When we're done, then I'm going to open the floor for comments. It won't be a dialogue here, but it'll be an opportunity for you to tell the council what your thoughts are based on what you heard. And that will likely have, there's no motion that's attached to this. This is a matter of discussion. So that will allow your opinions that are based on what you're hearing here to be informing to the council. Does that sound like a deal? Okay. All right. So with that, then let's talk about this neighborhoods markets zoning code. And I think, Steve, you'd be the guy to start the conversation, I believe.
I could just start.
Oh, you want to start it, Craig?
Real quick. And one thing I wanted to mention, the mayor talked about the new agenda format and the consent agenda being reviewed ahead of time. On the city website, when the agenda is put out on Fridays, there are a number of supporting documents depending on what the items are. And one of those things, which is new this year, is a memo from myself that explains anything that needs explanation more than what the agenda motion says itself. So in the case of the city prosecutor, there was some background information on that. Essentially what I talked about tonight. That's all available for the public as well. So when the agenda goes out on Friday, you can look at that and get your own background on those things. With the zoning code neighborhood markets thing, obviously, given the community concern about this issue that came up through the planning commission recently, we wanted to look at this issue and try to clarify it because there's definitely confusion as to what is a neighborhood market and that sort of thing. So that's why, to answer your question, Carolyn, we're proactively looking at clarifying what the code says. It's not an attempt to change the code so that a particular business can come back in and do something that the community is against or anything like that. We're trying to just clarify it. By Stephen, I asked him to draft something so that the council could consider, a starting point. Because a lot of times if you're just having a discussion without, some language to consider, it kind of goes all over the place. So I think that's why we've presented them something. This isn't necessarily a finished product. It's just the start of the discussion. So with that, Stephen, if you could.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so as you know, I'm a code officer. For the people normally that don't know, I am also a professional planner, so I am certified through the American Institute of Certified Planners. Just like an engineer or architect, I'm required to have a certain amount of professional experience as well as educational experience, and I have to sit qualifying exam. So I have the professional experience, the academic experience. I've sat a 4-hour exam to say I know what I'm talking about. My academic background, I have a master's degree in urban and regional planning. I have a historic preservation graduate certificate. My concentration academically is in land use law and historic preservation. So I feel pretty good about talking about this. So we kick it off, neighborhood markets definition update. So that's kind of our title slide. Take her away, Carrie. Skip it. So what is it right now? So the neighborhood market definition is a small retail establishment specializing in the sale of articles such as food products, over-the-counter drugs, tobacco products, magazines, candies, beverages, similar convenience items. So that is what is on the book right now as definition for neighborhood market. Next slide. That's a neighborhood market. That's a neighborhood market. That's a neighborhood market. That's a neighborhood market. Neighborhood market. Neighborhood market. Okay, so where is it applicable currently? Every residential zone neighborhood in Oneonta, as of 2011, was zoned to allow for neighborhood markets. So if you're in the city of Oneonta, you're permitted to open a neighborhood market, either by right or through special use permit. So districts R1, R2, and R3 require special use permits. And R4 allow markets by right. So some residential neighborhoods, you don't need a special use permit. You can just apply, site plan review, and you can open. That was all passed in 2011. That is not a new ordinance. That is nothing that has happened recently. That was passed in 2011. Okay, so although not an entitlement, Uses permitted by special use permit are generally considered as of right uses that are subject to a public hearing and conditions for approval. New York courts have also held that because the use is already permitted, an applicant requesting a special use permit need only demonstrate compliance with any legislatively imposed conditions, special use permit, site plan review, are an otherwise permitted use and is only subject to conditions attached to the use to minimize its impact on the surrounding area. Importantly, the decision to grant or deny a special use permit must be based on the evidence in the record, and the proposed special use permit cannot be denied based solely on generalized community opposition. That is the law. That is what the law says. Next slide. Here's the zoning map. So as you can see, R1, R2, R3, R4, all there. So basically, any neighborhood in the city, these types of uses are permitted, either through a special use permit or by right. That includes Walnut Street, that includes anywhere in the city. And that was all passed in 2011. That is not a new ordinance. That has been in effect since 2011. With this zoning map and that zoning ordinance rewrite. Okay, next one. Okay, why does it matter? Current definition for neighborhood market is not specific in relation to how markets are differentiated from other types of establishments that might serve or sell food and beverages. This results in a definition that is vague, required to be broadly interpreted when an application for neighborhood market is filed with the city. It is well established that zoning codes and regulations are a degradation of property owners' rights and into the use of their property. Zoning restricts the use of land which was otherwise free of restrictions. An owner's right and use of land are among the oldest and enjoy the most protection under common law and state and federal constitutions. Therefore, the courts of New York have regularly and consistently held that any such code and regulation must be strictly construed, and any ambiguity must be construed against the municipality in favor of the property owner. Since zoning regulations are a degradation of the common law, they must be strictly construed against the municipality for which has enacted and seeks to enforce them. I put this part in bold. Any ambiguity in the language used in such regulations must be reserved in favor of the property owner. Which means if you apply for a neighborhood market and you sell food and beverages, or you sell tobacco products, or you sell candy, and you check on the box that you're applying to open a neighborhood market in an R1, 2, 3, or 4 zone, you have a right to be heard for a special use permit or open by right. Because any ambiguity as to what you are opening is in favor of the applicant, and that is again the law. We cannot tell someone who's looking to, according to our definition, if you are selling food, beverage, convenience items, et cetera, you have the right to be reviewed as a neighborhood market if you claim you're meeting that code. Next slide. Okay, so we start with the definition draft. Pedestrian-oriented grocery, beverage, or specialty retail store offering food, beverage, and convenience products packaged for preparation and consumption away from the site of the store and oriented to the daily shopping needs of surrounding residential areas. The following regulations should be applicable to neighborhood markets. So this part of the definition, what we're saying is, we sell food, beverage, and convenience products packaged for preparation and consumption away from the location. So primarily you are retail, you are taking items, and you are leaving. And then we add conditions. So this condition says neighborhood markets may incorporate delis, beverage preparation, ancillary uses of the primary market or grocery use. These uses shall not exceed 25% of the total floor area of the neighborhood market. Any interior seating associated with an ancillary use should be included when calculating the total floor area of the ancillary use. So what that says is, if I have 100 square feet, only 25% of that can be for seating, food preparation, food delivery, food sale, you name it. So you're immediately saying your neighborhood market is primarily going to be retail because you could not add large amounts of seating, you could not add large amounts of food preparation area, you could not add the things that I think a lot of people were concerned about with the application that we had. Okay. Neighborhood markets, grocery stores, convenience stores, and other retail establishments mainly focused on selling pre-packaged or pre-prepared food and beverages are not considered restaurants. What we're saying here is the Green Earth is not a restaurant. I think we all can say that. Hometown Deli is not a restaurant. I think we can all agree to that. So what we're saying is neighborhood markets that meet this definition are not considered restaurants. And that's important because we'll get to that in a second. And then the last section is upper floors may be utilized for residential use or serve as office or storage space. So if you're in a two-story building, for example, like Hometown Deli, you could theoretically have an apartment above, which is basically conditioned to be this. All right, next slide. Okay, so neighborhood markets located within any zoning district designated as residential. So again, these definitions apply to the entire city. So those regulations would apply to places on Main Street, they'd apply to places on, Chestnut Street. These specific things would apply to anything in a neighborhood. So anything in a residential zone that requires a special use permit would fall under this. And then even R4, where you don't need a special use permit, they would still have to follow this. So basically what this is it's going through and saying, hours of operation can't exceed these times. Mechanical systems have to be screened. All on-site parking must be screened from any adjacent residential uses. It limits seating capacity to no more than 20 people. So no matter how big your space is, you can never have more than 20 people. You can never have a seating capacity that exceeds 20. And it says any exterior seating should be screened from adjacent properties. So in this definition, if it's in a residential zone, your maximum seating capacity is 20. Inside, outside, doesn't matter. Maximum capacity is 20. It's got to be screened. And then neighborhood markets located within any residential zoning district will still be subject to major site plan review. Will still be subject to obtaining special use permit. So we're not changing. We're not changing the current setup, but what we're saying is R4 will now also require a special use permit. We're actually making the definition, by doing this, we're actually making the definition much more restrictive than the current definition. Because we're not saying that you can just open a neighborhood market. We're saying there are very specific requirements associated with that use. Okay, next slide. Okay. Here's what he's done. So the conclusion of this. So we're updating this definition to clarify that neighborhood markets are very specific and they have very specific requirements that are beyond just the special use permit. Because when we get into discussing special use permit and site plan review, the planning commission has the ability to modify those requirements. Whereas they don't, like, if you applied for a neighborhood market special use permit, the planning commission doesn't, they're not required, you're not required to screen something right now. It's up to the planning commission. So if the planning commission says, we require you to screen your mechanicals, okay, but if they don't, you don't. I mean, there's no requirement there for anything. There's no requirement to screen parking. There's no requirement that a neighborhood market theoretically couldn't have more seating. By putting these controls in, what we're saying is you have to do that. So I know that someone said earlier, like, well, could a Starbucks open? Well, Starbucks don't open stores to have 4 seats and a tiny little coffee corner and then an empty store. So to meet that definition, you would essentially be constructing empty rooms with a coffee pot and 4 tables. I mean, and that's not going to be, it's not going to be profitable. I mean, you're not going to do that. And if you look at the definition that we redid for restaurant, it specifically says cafes, coffee shops, it lists are not considered neighborhood markets. So it specifically lists the types of uses that you're referencing as being restaurants and not neighborhood markets. The only residential zoning district that allows for restaurants are R4. And that's been in place since 2001. So in conclusion, what we're doing is we're updating and clarifying the definition. We're making clear differences between markets and other establishments that sell food and beverages. It establishes measurable requirements related to the amount of space that may be used for on-site food preparation seating areas. It adds additional regulations for residential neighborhoods, which currently do not exist. So if anything, this ordinance is making the neighborhood market use much more regulated and much less open to broad interpretation. And I want to add, in conclusion, the proposal adds no new uses to any zoning. This does not add any additional uses. It does not change the process of review outside of requiring additional review, additional regulation, and requiring special use permits in R4, which you currently don't need. So the idea that this is somehow assisting an applicant, I mean, if anything, this literally says, the updated zoning definition for restaurant literally says coffee shops are restaurants and therefore not neighborhood markets. So if that's assisting someone trying to open a coffee shop, you got it. Okay, so next slide. And I thought this was just kind of a cool thing. So this is the Hometown Deli, and it's actually from a map from 1910. And that's the Hometown Deli operating as a grocery store right there. It started operation in 1886, and that is in an R2 zone. So it's kind of an interesting little Sergeant's Market. So yeah, I just thought that was a neat little neighborhood market reference that I kind of. So that's kind of where we're at. I didn't really talk about the restaurant definition, but I will say that the intent of the restaurant definition is similar. So basically it's saying if you're in a residential neighborhood, because R4s are technically residential, and again, restaurants aren't permitted in the R4 zone. There was no regulation on the size of the restaurant, the seating location. I mean, that's all up to the planning commission to set. And if the planning commission doesn't set, then the planning commission doesn't set. So if you have regulation that exists that says you have to screen parking, you have to screen seating, you have to do all these things, you're setting clear parameters as to how the businesses are going to operate. And the other clarifying thing is it specifically says some of these uses that maybe fell into the neighborhood market category are not in fact neighborhood markets. So that is the clarification on the restaurant part. We can talk about that next time. I can make another PowerPoint. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, let me open it up to council. Thoughts? Yes. Cecilia, go ahead.
Yes. Go back to, earlier when you said, you're talking about the kind of legal framework.
Right.
I just had a question in terms of the location. So I think with the earlier slides, yeah. Just very early on in your presentation, you said this is law. This is the law, and so I'm just curious about.
So
are you
it's
talking about
case law.
municipal law, or are you talking about state law? Like what level?
So it's case law. So basically what's happened is when people have been denied special use permits, they filed lawsuits. Courts have said, you can't deny special use permits because you don't like them. And if we then deny special use permits because we don't like them, and an applicant decides to sue us, the court's going to cite a previous case saying, well, you can't just deny special use permits because you don't like the use. So it's been established through case law that special use permits are permitted use in the zone. And in fact, because they are permitted uses in the zone, they're in harmony with the zone. So one topic we could talk about is maybe we don't want these uses in residential zones. And that's okay too. I mean, that is an okay position to have. And I'm not opposed to saying that. Because I didn't write this code. It was here when I kind of took it on. So we've had a lot of public outcry against particular commercial uses in residential zones. In my time here, this is the first application we've ever had for one of these things. So it's kind of a new. But I will say, like, what we don't want, and typically what you don't want in the zoning, the land of zoning, is people attempting to do things that then require them to get use variances. Because use variances are very easy to file lawsuits against. And it's very easy for the municipality to lose in that lawsuit. Because part of this is literally just kind of covering our legal interests. So like, we don't want to deny special use permits that could result in us getting sued and then losing.
I don't know, how it works.
Yeah, it works with it. Doesn't work so well for us. So yeah, so I mean, we could discuss, like, maybe we would like to look at certain residential zones and say, we don't want, I mean, if you look at the zoning map, like R1, I mean, those are very low density, like fairly suburban type neighborhoods. We have a lot of R2 zones that are not as dense as. And then we have R4, so like R4s are like over by Academy Street, by the Armory. There's one, it's kind of that maroon color. Yeah, Grand Street is an R4. But the biggest kind of R zones be R2 zones. So yeah, I mean, maybe we talk about that. Maybe we say, do we really want to add neighborhood markets? I mean, maybe we say we only want neighborhood markets in certain parts of R2 zones, like certain maybe we say like Center Street, for example, maybe is an okay place to have neighborhood markets, but we don't want them on Woodside Ave, like, that's something we can talk about. But the current law, as it's written now, allows neighborhood markets in all of these zones. And it very loosely defines what they are. So in theory, you could open a Walgreens, you could bulldoze a bunch of, you could go to Walnut Street and bulldoze a bunch of houses and theoretically try to open a Walgreens. I don't support that, I don't think that that's a good idea. I wrote the city's historic preservation ordinance, I created our architectural review board, I've done nothing but push historic preservation, I don't wanna call it an agenda, but a position. So yeah, I don't want that, and I would not wanna see that, but as the code is currently written, those areas are protected, and all of these zones allow for those types of uses. Through that very loose definition.
Do we have further comments? Yes, Len.
So going back to cafes, can you explain that one more time about, can we do cafes? With what you're suggesting on the draft, does that exclude cafes and coffee shops?
So what it does is the draft definition for restaurant classifies cafes, coffee shops, what I would call food, like on-site, like consumption uses as restaurants. And it separates neighborhood markets as ancillary delis. You buy a deli sandwich, they wrap it in paper, you take it with you.
At the most, you have 20 people on site.
At the most, you have seating for 20, so if you go to Stewart's, there's like 4 booths in Stewart's. That seats about 20 people. Like if those booths are packed full, you got 20 people. Stewart's without gas pumps meets the definition of a neighborhood market. So yeah, so it's what it's attempting to do is separate so that we're saying we're okay with like Hometown Deli, buy a sandwich, take it with you, buy beer, take it with you and go. What we're saying we don't want necessarily is sit down, on-site, bunch of tables and chairs, wait staff, kitchen, food preparation areas. It's trying to kind of keep those really small. And by setting that 25% threshold, you're not allowing an owner to install a lot of seating, you're not allowing an owner to install a commercial kitchen. You're reducing the density and intensity of that type of use. To the point where it's probably not practical for a place like Dunkin' Donuts to, I don't know, open a bookstore with a pot of coffee. And I mean, you're really reducing what they can do as far as.
Right, and so I also looked at the bulk and use table chart. And so for the neighborhood market, it would require 6,000 square foot for a lot. Is that a common size?
Yeah.
And that's a very common size?
6,000 square feet is the minimum lot size. Let me rephrase that. 6,000 square feet is what our code says R2 zones should have. It's a mix, but again, that's getting into like area variances. So if I apply for a neighborhood market and I don't meet the lot size, it's very easy for me to go to the zoning board and say, I don't meet the lot size, but neither of these other uses do either. So like you're getting into area variances are very easy to give out because they're not as structured. So if you can show, if I'm going in front of a judge and I say 14 houses on this street have a 4,000 square foot lot size, how am I any different? Why did I not get a variance and they did? Or why did I not get a variance despite this being a very common condition throughout the zone?
Mm-hmm.
That's an easy give. Very, very easy give, very easy. It's easy to issue that variance to someone who doesn't want it. So like, let's say the neighborhood's like, I don't want this. I don't want it. It's easy for the zoning board of appeals to not issue that variance and for us to be sued. It's also easy for the zoning board to issue that variance and a neighbor to sue us. So we're in like a kind of a weird world where area variances are fairly subjective, but also like easy to either give or not give. And that becomes kind of a weird, you don't want to be in that position.
Emily?
Oh, I was just curious with your example about like a bookshop with that maybe sold coffee as well, like, would that fall into the definition of a neighborhood market, like other types of retail? And are other types of retail permitted
I would say,
currently?
I would say that a bookshop that's selling, it's not selling food, beverages or convenience items would not be.
A neighborhood market, are other kinds of retail, this is, sorry if I'm getting in the weeds
No,
a
you're
little bit, but I'm curious, are other types of businesses allowed in
No.
these zones, only
Oh,
neighborhood?
so the only real commercial businesses you're seeing in R1 through 3 are neighborhood markets, bed and breakfasts, and then you have like your kind of compulsory like schools, churches, things that you kind of, that typically are just allowed in residential neighborhoods. When you get into R4, and this is something I brought up in kind of my review here, that's where it gets weird. So if you get into R4 zones, we start allowing a lot of stuff. And included in that lot of stuff is accessory use taverns. Which I think that what we should rephrase that as restaurants that have ancillary tavern uses. Because what you're getting into is like, you could theoretically open a tavern like right off of, if you go like up Beat Street, like if you there's a little R4 that's like behind Huntington Park.
Yep.
So like, you could theoretically like open a tavern in your house,
Yeah,
and I don't know if that's really a great,
right.
you know, if we're talking about what types of commercial uses we want to see in residential neighborhoods. I think it's one thing to have a restaurant that happens to sell beer. I think it's another thing to have a tavern that happens to have peanuts.
Right.
So like R4 is where you get into very much like there's a lot of commercial use that we otherwise don't permit.
I mean, personally, I'm just not, I'm not opposed to having different kinds of businesses within residential. I mean, there's been a lot of, historically in Oneonta, there's been a lot of like, really cool stuff, like even look at the Italian Kitchen, within a residential neighborhood, or there were like some little bookshops like out of people's homes, like in the past, I wonder if we could manipulate the code so that it does have things that aren't gonna cause like, a disturbance to the people that live there, but also invite people to open nice little businesses.
Well, that's part
Throughout
of what
Oneonta.
we're trying to mitigate
Right.
here.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
mean,
problem defining nice,
right,
you know.
it's very subjective.
I know,
You
I
can-
know,
you-
yeah,
you
yeah,
can
I know.
Have a business that is run for
All right,
10
well,
years by-
you'll
by
have to
people
go
who are very
run
responsible
by me. No, I'm
and
just-
have low impact on the community, but.
Yeah,
if-
I know.
If someone rowdy opens it and it's in conformance with the statute, then you're stuck.
Right,
And not only that, once you're stuck forever.
yeah,
Because even if it's in violation, if it's there, it's a prior non-conforming use, and it can be passed on, can be sold,
yeah.
you know, it becomes problematic.
Further comments or discussion, folks? Yes, Lou.
I went through, a lot of it, Stephen, and just wanted to thank you for your time. I think it adds a lot of clarity to the issue. That a lot of people feel very strongly about, so thank you for the time you put into this and consideration. Thank you.
Yes, Katie.
So I agree, thank you. I wanted to ask, I appreciate the question that you raised, which is about thinking about the future, like, do we want these types of businesses in these zones? Do we want to restrict them to certain areas within each zone? Those are very interesting, I think. In my opinion, those questions warrant more discussion and more just thought from council about what we would like the future of the zoning code to look like. It's interesting, I learned a lot about, I'm like a very specific person, so I'm excited that like the more specific you are, the better here. But I guess my question is like, do we now that we have this presentation and we have a draft to work off of, which I appreciate that you created, do we take this to a committee and do more work? What is the process?
Yeah, I don't see this going to a committee. This is something that's Stephen,
I mean, as written, or are we going to discuss
Yeah.
it somewhere, are we going to answer these questions?
Right.
Through discussion?
So,
somewhere?
I
Where
wonder,
is that? Yeah.
Stephen, can you share the PowerPoint with everybody? Number one.
Yeah.
And then we can come back to this and, make this a focus of a, you know, of a end of an agenda meeting.
So is the idea that all code changes will now be discussed by the full council at council meetings?
I think if there's, a rationale for council to move something to legislative, that the council would determine that.
I guess that's what I'm asking
Yeah.
right now.
Are you asking that this moves to legislative?
I think so, yeah, because then I think we can dig in a little bit more to some of the other things that
Mhm.
maybe, you know, we have questions about, we
Mhm.
can talk more about.
Yeah.
You know, ideas for proposed changes and.
If we have a
so-
consensus of council to move to legislative, we certainly can.
What is that?
That this winds up being discussed, more in depth in the legislative committee and then gets brought back to council, as either a proposal or, you know, in some other fashion, a discussion generator.
Public have a chance to voice concerns.
At
Right,
the
so
committee,
vote.
at the committee and at council.
Yes, yes.
And to your council.
Yes, but let's get to the idea, do we want to in fact move this to legislative as a topic of further consideration? And basically I just need 5 people to tell me that this is something they'd like to do, and it looks like I have consensus, yes. So we'll move this to legislative.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, now I'm gonna open.
Limits.
I'm
Are
sorry?
we, as a government entity, are we allowed to limit the number of businesses? I think Emily said the types of businesses, that would be a question.
You can't limit the number.
The number.
That's unconstitutional taking.
Okay.
You can say what it can be in a place and cannot be in a place. There are some situations where there are concentrations, for example, the courts have upheld. If you have a limited number of bars that have to be at least 300 feet apart, especially as they relate to school and churches and things like that. You can talk about concentrations, but you can't otherwise what you're doing, you're giving a monopoly to a particular owner or a particular group of owners and say, these special people can do something here, but no one can ever do it later, and that's unconstitutional.
So
So
could we say?
you could come up with spacing.
You come, yeah, and again, if you remember at one point, that was done with, you know, with short-term rentals. You can do, because the neighborhood impact, you can have, if you have one community market every half mile, that's much different than if you have 5 within 500 feet.
You just have to have a rational purpose for it.
And the rational purpose is traffic impact.
Yeah.
Change, fundamental impact on the nature of the community as a whole.
Whatever you want.
Right. Isn't it nice when we get to talk to each other and we agree?
Yeah. Okay, so we've agreed.
Yeah.
So we've agreed that this is going to move to legislative. I think we've ended our council piece of this discussion.
Can I just add?
Yeah,
one
sure.
thing? I mean, and Dave, this might be a key question. Do we want to entertain the idea of a moratorium on applications for these types of uses while we work through this?
Yeah.
And that's from.
So my concern is what caused a lot of these issues was the fact the definition is not clear. If we remain with an unclear definition, we're just leaving ourselves open for applications that are very similar to it.
They could be filed tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
of statutes.
So per Stephen's suggestion, if there's a desire on council's part,
I'd like to move that we entertain a moratorium. I don't move.
We have to file.
Yeah, it has to be able to.
Oh,
Yeah,
shoot.
we'd have to draft it.
We'll draft it.
But I'm
It has-
saying we
it
could
has-
file
it has environmental impact, you have to go through the whole
Okay.
process, but.
Oh, okay.
but again, it would seem that, do we have the
Somebody do it, never fail.
consensus of council that Stephen should do that? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So you've got to go ahead to do that. Now, again,
I'll do that.
thank you. So again, what we're doing is kind of reinventing for the purpose of engaging the community more robustly than has been the case in the past. You've heard this discussion here, and I'm just going to open the floor to folks for comments for these next several minutes. If we can keep our comments for a couple of minutes, again, identifying who you are, where you live, and those comments will help inform further council discussion and most likely the legislative process. So with that, George?
George Wells, 12 Walnut Street. For the members of council, I would ask that you all remember your representatives, but your constituents. That I think a lot of the antagonistic response that you felt from this application and the way it was processed included a lack of communication. Included a lot of some of the comments I heard here tonight, which included, well, I personally think, listen, what you personally think is not representing your constituents. Coming out in favor of a project without talking to your constituents is your personal right, but is not your right as a representative of your community. So please, as you go through these processes, think about and talk to your constituents. Remember, again, you're representing them, not your personal interests. I applaud you. I sit here and watch you go through the process you have to go through to try to get something done. And it would drive me absolutely out of my mind. So I appreciate you doing what you're doing, but please remember, it's not for you.
Okay, Kathy,
Yeah,
Kathy Borelli.
Kathy Barati, Chestnut Street, Oneonta, related to what George said, but also something that we've been discussing here in other meetings. I would like to suggest that each common council member start having a monthly board meeting, more informal than this, which would give an opportunity, not unlike professors who hold office hours. If nobody showed up, nobody showed up at a set time. It would not only give an opportunity for discourse, but it would narrow down the amount of time that would be spent here. There would be on those issues, because people would have already had time to hash some things out. And I believe there's something about that it's supposed to be happening. I heard something said like that. Anyway, I'm done.
Mark, may I comment on that?
Yes, sure, of course.
Hi there. For everyone in the room, Bryce Wooden, moving forward, just started, 18th day, I think, on the job for everyone in the 7th Ward. I'm working with Carrie, on doing using, email Nixle to get some type of that going. So if anyone is here in the 7th Ward, which I see some faces, but, I'm gonna get that going probably by February. Just, I'll get input, like if we don't want to do public meetings, that's fine. I'll get kind of a survey that way. If mail or anything gets weird with that, I have students up at the college, we'll still go door to door and drop some stuff off. And that way when we collect, everything for me being new into government is gonna be about data collection, like George said. So that's something, just because I'm new, just not much.
Well, two things I'll just add to my opinion. One is that I think it should be across the board. I mean, it's great if one person does it, but I think it really needs to be that everybody in the community has the opportunity, because common council is responsible to the community. So the other thing, just last point, is that as the chair of the Welcome Home Task Force, this would also be an opportunity for each common council member to meet and greet and develop rapport with new people.
Thank you. Anybody? Yes.
My name is Michelson, East Street. Is this discussion only about the market?
That's what we'd like.
Okay. And I'd just like to address this lady here. We have, we can obtain email, phone number for our ward members. And I think that that makes it necessary for us to take the initiative, because I know that you people are, if you're compensated at all, it's not much. And I would like to say that I will contact, and I think my new representative is, yes, spouse of Professor Knudsen. That's right. Who I've tried to meet you, but anyway, I think it's up to us to take the initiative to contact. And I did work carefully, attentively, and with lots of words to stop the 31 Walnut Street. And however that came to pass, I talked to the guy, Matt Grady, and I said, I think you should withdraw your application. And he said, no, I'm not going to. And then he withdrew. So I'm not on that road, but I walk it a lot. I'm pleased. And I appreciate what you do here, because I don't want to.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that'd like to, yes?
Barbara Daria, I live at 2 Oak Street and we on 4 to 6, which backs right on the property that we've been talking about. First of all, thank you very much for your hard work and the understanding and the clarification of what's happening and why, because that makes a big difference. 2 things. One, in your section B of the codes for the neighborhood market that you were talking about, it's 25%. Is that 25% of the inside of a building? Or is that 25% of all the property that's included in the neighborhood market?
It's the building use, not the parcel.
Okay.
And it would include exterior seating. If you look in the code, it says exterior seating, interior seating, food preparation areas.
And it would be 25% of
The structure,
the physical structure, not the
parcel.
not the property. The other thing too is talking about parking. Would these places be required to provide?
The R zones all require parking.
So they do.
Yeah.
And
They already require parking.
yeah, and how do you determine how many parking spots might be?
It's in the code.
Okay,
It's specifically written in the code.
okay, that's my questions. Thank
But
you.
I will say, the code also allows the planning commission to waive parking requirements.
Say again?
The planning commission and the zoning board can waive parking requirements. They can also waive any conditions in the zoning code.
Just because someone asks.
Well, you can do whatever you want until you get sued.
Until you get there.
Yeah, so basically, if the planning commission were to waive parking requirements, they did it arbitrarily, it would put us at there would be a legal issue there. So there are requirements for parking. They already exist in the code. They already exist for every use in the code.
Okay, so if you had a place and after all of this is settled and you managed all the requirements and then applied, but you're all the requirements, does the city have to allow that?
The city,
Whether the,
so the city, the way special use permits work, and that's why I put it in the presentation. A special use permit, we can't just deny. We have to have a reason for denial, and it can't just be because neighbors don't want it.
that's what I was asking.
So that's how case law works. That's how zoning works. If we don't want to have these types of uses in residential neighborhoods, we would have to change the zoning code to not allow them. If we want these types of uses to be a special use permit, we have to have a reason for denial that it's not just, well, people in the neighborhood don't want it.
Right.
Because special use permits are considered uses that are permitted in the zone. Just like single family homes are permitted in the zone, just like, churches and schools, they're permitted in the zone. So by saying that these require a special use permit, all we're saying is they're permitted in the zone as long as they meet specific legislative requirements. Special use permit application, site plan review. If you fulfill all the requirements of the special use permit application and the site plan review process, we cannot legally deny a special use permit.
Understood. Could we include in that, the beautiful presentation that you made, a limitation for how far one neighborhood market needs to be from another?
Yeah, we can add that. I mean, that is something we can add to the code.
Okay.
But yeah, I just want to be very clear, like, we have to have, the purpose of fleshing out these definitions, if we're gonna keep these types of uses, is to say, we have definitive reasons why we can deny or not deny a permit. And we have specific things that the only way you're going to get around is if you request them from the zoning board of appeals, and they have a legitimate reason to waive them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Barb. We had another, yes.
Yeah, so Kyle Marks, 35 Elm Street. I have 2 things that I agree with Mr. Yearly and two that I disagree with, one thing that I do agree with. So I'll start off with my disagreements. First off, I appreciate him making a stab at a definition, although I think the definition is essentially a restaurant in guise. It's as close to a restaurant as you can be without being a restaurant. Number 2, the definition or his statement that a Starbucks is not a cafe, but is a cafe, but the Green Earth is not a cafe. As soon as you walk into the Green Earth, you look right there, it's a kitchen. You order your food, they prep it ahead of time. They don't simply have a sandwich made and wrap it up. I mean, you order food, it's hot, it's freshly prepared, you call ahead, whatever. So to call the Green Earth a neighborhood market is not accurate. However, I'm not gonna be negative because I would like progress made on this, and I will like to say what I do agree with him, and that is prior to coming to this, I looked up codes from towns and cities across New York, across the country. And one thing that I found in R1, R2, so low, moderate density type areas, which is what we're talking about, the following are pretty consistent across the board, which he's already mentioned. Education, so schools, etc., religious, churches, municipal type buildings, so town halls, and sorry, all memorized, I'm not a code enforcer. Daycare and bed and breakfast were the other two that were most common. And those are all listed currently in our table. Where Oneonta differs substantially from towns our size and even towns much larger than us is that somehow we allow neighborhood markets in R1 and R2, so low moderate density. And I agree with Steve, and I hope we'll all agree and the legislative could agree that we could simply stop all this ambiguity and remove neighborhood markets from R1, R2, and even R3, and just get rid of the whole thing. Stop the interpretation. No offense, Steve, but it's your interpretation. I know it's just a draft. You're asking for input. And again, I don't want to be negative. I'm just saying neighborhood markets to align with towns and cities across the US should not be located in low and moderate density residential areas.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have we anybody else? Yes.
Well, Paul Morrison at 28 Walnut. First off, great presentation. Thank you. It's made it very clear where we stand, and I think it stands with each and every one of you here because I was glad to see that we're looking to take this to a legislative session and talk more about it. But ultimately, it's going to come down to your decision that you make. Where do we want to push Oneonta in the next 5, 10, 15 years? Are we moving away from Main Street and moving into the neighborhoods? What is going to happen when, you know, as far as, you know, new population coming into this area? Where do we want for them to live? Where do we want for their kids to grow up and play and have a good time? And where do we want for them to shop? You hold that in the palm of your hands now. From what Steve said with the law and how it stands and how it's written, you can change it. Please take a strong look at that and make that determination. Where do we want the city of Oneonta to be 5, 10, 15 years from now? And how do we see it potentially, how do we want it to grow? So that it's going to be beneficial for everyone. So I think that you guys hold the key to that. And I applaud that we're looking to take that to the legislative session.
Very good. Yes.
Art Daria on the other half of 2 Oak Street. Just a point of clarification information. I think I know the answer to this, but I'd like to address it to the co-officer. Presentation we had, I don't know, 2 weeks, a month ago for the coffee shop brewery thing. Would that be approved under the guise of this new proposal?
No, because it wouldn't meet the definition. Their proposal was to build a large addition to the whole seating.
Yeah.
Which would have exceeded the floor area allowed under the neighborhood market code.
And if they scaled it down just a little, it would, or?
I mean, so if you have a garage that's 400 square feet.
Yeah.
And you can only seat 20 people both inside and outside, you're gonna have a big room with a lot of nothing in it. So then you get into the argument of like, okay, so if they're not selling, I mean, if they're only selling stuff to go, and they can only seat 20 people at any given time, the rest of that is just dead space that they're not having any retail in. I mean, it wouldn't meet the definition. You would hit a point where you would no longer meet the definition of neighborhood market.
Right. I'd like to take just a couple more and then we'll move on with our meeting. Yes, go ahead, Kristen.
Kristen Slough, 5 Oak Street. So I have a question, I think for David, because, the reason to deny the planning commission and zoning board needs to have a reason to deny based on code, but when I was on the planning commission for 5 years, you would say our reason for denying things that came from the planning commission was if it went against the comprehensive plan.
That's a rational reason.
That's a rational reason, so it's not completely just code based, is that correct?
Well, understand that the reason you have a planning board, the reason you have a zoning, you get studying, talking, you'll never get me done. Every single piece of property is unique. 18 Walnut is different than 45 Walnut. 1 Walnut is different from 25 Church Street. So when you establish rules that apply to particular zones, there are always things that don't quite fit. Why is something allowed on this foot, and then 1 foot over from a line, it's totally barred? So there are always situations that don't make sense, that do injustice, that don't treat the same people fairly. And so the purpose of zoning and planning boards is to give an opportunity for people who are being treated unequally to come in before a community group and explain to them why the laws, when they're applied to this particular property, are not fair, are unjust, why it damages them, why it's taking away from their right to use their property the way they want. And so when you're looking at what the basis for either granting or denying a use variance or an area variance, you have to look at lots of different things. One is traffic, impact on the community, impact on the neighbors, neighborhood characteristic. Does this conform? One of the things you're talking about is the long-term plan, is the comprehensive plan. But a comprehensive plan is a philosophic statement. It doesn't say exactly what's going to happen over the next 10 years, but it says the direction that you want to move things. We always want to terminate prior non-conforming uses because they're uses that are illegal they're illegal now in the current statute. One of the things that again, when I started this, I had hair, and the pendulum swings. One of the things that people wanted when they were developing the downtown area to become more residential, they didn't want to say, we live in a food desert. We have to get into if we want to go to the grocery store, we have to get in the car, we have to drive to Southside. We would love to have neighborhood places where you can go and have a cup of coffee or pick up some things, get some fresh vegetables in the neighborhood within walking distance. We want to decrease the impact of cars. We want to decrease parking. We want to decrease the cause of traffic everywhere. And what you're doing when you deny neighborhood markets is you're forcing everybody to have a car. You're forcing them they want a quart of milk, to not walk, but get in their car and drive through. So all I'm saying is that those are the competing philosophies. I don't care. I can guarantee you that he doesn't care. But the council has to make philosophic determinations about impact, and every action has an opposite reaction. So balancing it is difficult, but yes, comprehensive plan is another reason for either granting or denying an application. Did that answer your question?
I think so. I guess I think what I struggle with a little bit is that, I feel like the planning commission doesn't feel like they can deny certain things that come up. And my concern too with the last.
Sometimes they choose not to. There's a difference between not understanding what they can, and choosing not to, because that's their bent.
Oh, just choosing not to deny because that's the bent.
It's a philosophy. All zoning is philosophy. And so the philosophy of the planning board, the philosophy of the zoning board has an impact on the results.
Right. I guess, and I just want to this was a lot of stuff on the Stagecoach, was foiled, so we had information, that was transpired up within the city. And I guess this was something that the chair of the planning commission wrote to somebody else on the commission. Person on the commission, the council, was saying that they were in favor of everybody's got their opinion, they were in favor of it. And the chair of the planning commission said, and I quote, "You're very welcome. I'm also in favor. So the PC is approving a special use permit and site plan app unique to the building. If Stagecoach sells, then the new owner would have to reapply." And he continues on. So their philosophy is already presented to the community before the community and the public and the the neighbors get to even speak. It's their philosophy is already stated and already planning on approving. So I guess my point is like, they need to listen to the people living in the city as well, even though they may have their own agenda or, work for the state and get better.
The other thing I can tell you is, and you already know the answer to this, is that no one votes until such time as there has already been a public hearing. So the public always has an opportunity to be heard, and you can always write it prior to any vote, whether that changes the mentality of the person who wrote that email or not.
Right.
That, again, that has to do with the philosophy of the person who's holding the office, not the law as a whole. And if he was speaking irrationally or illegally, then you and anybody else who believes that they were acting irrationally or illegally should, consider bringing action to nullify what they did.
I don't know how we go about doing anything like that.
Get a lawyer.
Get a lawyer.
And this goes back to my point. This is where we lose trust. This is where we lose faith. And we lose faith in the folks that we're supposed to count on, who we've elected to take
You
care
didn't
of
elect
us.
the planning board chairman, I'll guarantee you that.
Oh, no, we didn't elect him, but certainly, after the request was pulled back, he certainly came out and said, boy, I wish they had let this follow through. He certainly, again, showed his colors, and I have to tell you, as an employee of ours, that's a problem for me.
He's not your employee.
Okay.
And understand, you
But
said
I'm not on the planning board.
he shows his colors.
Yes.
That if he had said, I'm totally opposed to this, I think the people should come out and do it, would that have shown his colors too?
Sure it would.
But when you say, you should understand that people who hold office and who are appointed to boards, and they're allowed to have their own opinions. They're only one vote. They're not
They're representing all of us,
No, but they don't represent you. Understand, they don't represent you.
not me as one person. They
Yeah, and
represent
what you're
us as
saying
a
is you
community.
disagree with what he said because he disagreed with your position.
But I wouldn't have been, I would have been just as upset if he came out the other way.
Again.
David,
Then
you
he's-
know me, I know.
So-
then you just don't want to express his opinion.
So at this,
We want to be unbiased.
folks,
We would like some assurance that we have someone unbiased who's helping to make those decisions.
Okay.
He has a lot of power in that position, as you well
A
know.
lot of people have a lot of power in a lot of places, and
okay, folks, this has been, I think, more constructive than not. I think hopefully you found it to be a useful expenditure of your time. Certainly the council and the legislative committee, as they're also a part of this council, have heard you, and this conversation will continue. So I thank you very much for your input. I thank you very much for your attendance. And I look forward to seeing more of you folks, as this is not going to go away. Yes, Luke?
Before you close discussion, I'd like to do a point real quick if I may.
Yes.
Just because it was brought up, it's, for the folks that are in the first board, I held, board meetings quarterly, every year for the past 4 years. So if in the first board, we have them quarterly, to your point. It does get difficult doing them monthly, just speaking from experience, I used to do them every other month. It gets difficult, especially when there's one or two meetings from that time.
Do others do that?
I can't speak for it, that's, I can just say, average out, I do them every quarter. That's great. So if you're in the first board, I'm gonna try to get them on a regular schedule, again, everything, March, June, whatever.
All righty. So again, we're going to close this out here, Carolyn, if that's all right.
Just.
Oh, go ahead.
So, Carolyn Marks, 18. Or 7th Ward. I just wanted to ask earlier, as you're looking at E and hours of that operation and trash and mechanical equipment, and remember everyone, this is in a neighborhood all of this time, these time slots that we didn't really discuss in depth. So what I would like to know, and you've mentioned it, Steve, in the previous, planning commission with Stagecoach, you mentioned it again this evening. If we don't want this type of commercial activity within our neighborhoods, what is the process of revising the law and eliminating the SUP for neighborhood markets?
Council votes on.
Right, so this will come, so this, again, this conversation will happen in legislative. They will come back to us either with proposals or discussion items to be then brought back to legislative at their prerogative. And you will be privy to all of this as we move forward. So again, I thank all of you very much for your engagement, very much so. And at this point, I'm going to turn to the city administrator. Wake him up.
Wow.
And
Wow.
say, if you would, your report, please.
Quick report. I mean, it's start of the year, a lot of things going on that are routine in nature. 2023 closeout tasks, 2024 setup, ordering materials, equipment, completion of parts inventory, quarterly annual reporting, training plan updates, reviews of processes, recruitment and hiring, all the normal things. Aside from those things that are on the agenda tonight and we're discussing, there's not a whole lot to report. I could take some questions. The one thing I did want to just share some data with you, because it's probably an interesting topic given our changes to parking in downtown over the last year. We had a snow event on Saturday, January 6th, and that required plowing. And, you know, with our ordinance of anything more than 2.5 inches, essentially 3 inches or more of snow, we asked cars to require cars to all move off the streets. Some statistics from that: 5 OPD officers over the course of 3 hours roughly wrote 86 tickets. Those tickets are $100 a piece. As of today, 4 of those were voided, 1 dismissed via appeal, 24 have been paid, and the other 56 have not yet been paid. Appeals needed to be filed within 10 days of ticketing. Late fees are 50% after 15 days and 100% after 30 days. We did again open up the Damaski Field parking lot and clear that out as an overflow area, and we instituted our downtown shuttle. So anyone who, you know, maybe historically had used the Deep Street parking lot to move their car off the street could use the Damaski Field parking lot and take a shuttle back to Center City. No one used the shuttle. The 4 cars that were parked there, 2 were long-term parkers who were using trailways and were out of town. So it, obviously students are not, you know, we're on break. It wasn't utilized. There was no need for it. We'll see how it goes the next time we have a big snowstorm. I just thought that might be interesting information for everyone to hear. It seems as though there was ample off-street parking to handle the need. Obviously, we always have a number of tickets that are issued when we have snowstorms. I think 86 from what I gathered from the police, a little bit higher than we have had in the past without students here. So we'll kind of watch that as we go forward. So aside from that, I didn't have any other specific updates. If there are questions, happy to take those.
One.
Do you have an update on our agreement with the town over the water? Off of Oneida Street.
West End Water Districts. The town attorney was drafting that. I have not seen the draft yet.
You give them a time period to get that done, because I think I asked the same question at the beginning of this summer.
I can't hold them to a time period. I could certainly follow up with the meeting coming up in about a week.
Any other questions for Greg? All right, we'll move into my very short report. Tonight, as our topic of interest, we're going to be reviewing and discussing the city's strategic plan. You'll have received a link to the information on that last week, I believe, and we'll look forward to that conversation. In the coming weeks, topics of interest discussions will be centered on a general discussion of the city's current funding streams with a focus on their expected growth, the expansion of some, identification and strategizing of others. We'll be looking for ideas that can be made actionable or candidates to be more fully fleshed out in future discussions. We're reviewing communications policies and procedures guided by the report that was generated by our December 9th retreat. You'll all be getting a copy of that in the next few days, I believe. I'll ask that we are provided with an overview of the city's zoning strategies, Stephen, and current policies with a specific focus on the impact of short-term rentals and a general accounting of Oneonta's housing needs and challenges. This is down the road. We'll be talking about the airport too, looking at the goals and the strategies, the potential, the obstacles, the long-term plans, and the short-term needs, understanding the big picture there, what's best for the future of the facility and what commitments the city should be making. So these are all important considerations, and there's a lot more to be talked about. So if you have topics, council, that you would like to have discussed, and of course, obviously, they're going to be generated by some of this conversation as well, obviously. Just shoot me an email. We'll gather as much supporting documentation as we're able and provide that to you in the weeks before so that you have an informed discussion, or at least as informed a discussion as we possibly can have. Next time that we're together on February 6th, I will want to discuss the points and the purpose of the Downtown Renaissance program. And a few people are privy to that, not everybody. So I'll be sending that documentation to everybody, if not this evening, certainly tomorrow, so that you have the time to kind of really review it. And so we'll have a conversation about that. I will tell you, I've spoken with many of the key players in the community, Bassett Healthcare, the colleges, Kano, Clinton Plaza, and others. And we do have a lot of support for the effort, which gives me a lot of hope and a lot of faith that we may have landed on something. I do believe this is a best and fastest opportunity to turn the local economy around. It won't require a single dollar more from the city than has already been committed, which is a big deal. So as I said, at the end of this meeting, or certainly tomorrow, I'll be getting you all a copy of that proposal. And I'll look forward to discussing your suggestions, and we'll go through it point by point and make it an even stronger plan. Lastly, I'll be presenting the annual State of the City address on February 20th. So, you know, set your snooze alarms. You're looking at 15 minutes from me at minimum. So, but we have a lot to talk about. We've actually done quite a bit in the city this year. A lot to talk about, and a lot of strategies to be discussing as we move forward. So thank you very much for your attention to that short-ish mayor's report, and we'll move on now to our topic of interest discussion, which is the strategic plan. And I'll let Greg take that away.
All right. Thanks, Mayor. Obviously, we've discussed this a number of times throughout the budget process. We've got a couple new council members here tonight. So I thought it would make sense to start off the year. Just a quick overview of that. We shared it. It's explained in the memo. I can go through it quickly. And then we can kind of talk about how we might develop this further over the course of the next year and beyond. So I apologize to the members of the audience who obviously probably didn't print this out and bring it with you. The plan I'm referencing is a spreadsheet, and it's in a PDF format. It's part of the packet that was distributed with the agenda. So if you wanted to look it up after the fact, it's available at the city website. So we originally drafted this in 2022 as part of the 23 budget process. Essentially, we went through and we listed every city service that's provided and categorized those in areas and specific services. And I forget the number. I think there's 53 or something like that. Obviously, the city provides a broad range of services. We have 10 department heads and a number of 180 plus employees, depending on the time of year, who implement those services. We have conversations every year in the budget process about what the city can afford and how much are we raising taxes and what revenue sources might we be able to increase and what sort of services we want to provide. So that the intent of establishing this process and this discussion back then was to, again, define our services, and then we asked council to give their feedback on their impression of what the level of service that we were currently providing is. Relative to one another, and also indicating whether they thought that level of service should be maintained, increased, or decreased for any reason. There was consensus, aggregating those responses. There were no services that council members wanted to decrease, and that's not a surprise to anyone. The city isn't providing any unnecessary services in the council's view. Most of the services, council members were interested in increasing that level of service, and of course, that's not a a specific, quantifiable thing at that point. It's just more qualitative and anecdotal. But that, to me, that was good feedback to know that, okay, we're providing, the services we're providing are things that we want to continue providing. So then we need to find out how to pay for those services. We're still not at the point where obviously we have a operational budget that is balanced. We're using our savings in the general fund specifically to cover our operational deficits the last few years. And it's not an uncommon thing that by the end of the year, that deficit is not as large as it may have been budgeted, because obviously we're budgeting conservatively in certain areas and things, sales tax, for instance, in 2023 came in higher than budgeted because that's been trending upward. So it's maybe not as doom and gloom as it might look if you just look at the number, but it is a concern going forward. We need to find a way to balance our needs and wants with what we can afford. So again, carrying on with a strategic plan, I think the next step is for us to develop together some goals. On the strategic plan, it lists a number of objectives, which are identified by our department heads and staff as to what we're currently working on in support of each of those services. And there's highlights there that are explained in the memo, green, yellow, or red, depending on if it's moving forward, progressing as expected, or there's some reason it's not a priority right now, but there's nothing holding it up per se, or red if there's like some roadblock, whether that's a funding issue or regulatory issue or whatever it may be, staffing issue. So in order to continue to allocate our resources, limited resources we have, as best we can, we need to develop what our overarching goals are for the city, and then, bring those down to a more specific level, and fitting them into these particular services. We can't focus on everything all at once. So that's the overarching thing. I don't think we want to go through every single one right now, but we could. That's kind of the idea with these discussion items at the end of the agenda, is we can take half an hour and dive into something. We kind of already did that tonight. We could do that again. We've been talking about, we had that retreat with Dick Schultz, and we talked about communication, and I think maybe a retreat like that, a similar one, might be something we want to explore later on, maybe the second quarter of this year, to focus more on prioritizing and setting goals. Sort of it's in motion. It's a fluid thing.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
So as Greg and I have talked about this a bit, right? So the strategic plan is as you look at it took me a few minutes to find it. Thank you very much. But as you look at the strategic plan, it's essentially, it's a spreadsheet that gives you line by line, this is the thing that we think is important that we're working on, and where we are with that, at any given time, what our primary objective, secondary, third, et cetera. But what Greg said, and I'm not sure if it really resonated with everybody. This, as we look at it, as I've looked at it, and I think you're in agreement, Greg, it's a collection of different tasks, different priorities, but nothing in of itself is prioritized, among these various. And so so forget that we even have this for a second. So we're running a city. We have a desire to have a future that looks like what? So identifying what we want gives us the beginnings of our goals, right? And when we start to determine what our goal is, then we can start to come back into our strategic plan. Greg mentioned the retreat that we had. The gentleman that facilitated that retreat, Dick Schultz, has a program that he provides more to businesses, in which he identifies rocks and pebbles and sand. And I think he may have referenced it during the retreat. With the idea being that you can only put, you got a glass tumbler or whatever, you can fill it with something, but if you fill it with rocks, am I going about this right? He determines that you want to get your sand in there, you get your pebbles in there, and you get your rocks in there. And if you filled it up with sand and pebbles, you're only going to cut a couple of rocks. And if your rocks are your priorities, right? You with me? If your rocks are your priorities, then you want to actually get your priorities in that class first, right? So you get, and he says, does Dick, and he's got some substance behind his opinion that 7 priorities is a reasonable number to try to juggle. So if we were to determine 7 rocks, then we could determine 2, that sand and those pebbles that might also fill up the time of our staff who are, already kind of maxed out. But gives them the ability, and we all know, every time that you find yourself, and I think maybe the folks here know too, from this, if you find yourself spending 2 hours and change doing something, and you can walk away from it feeling like something got accomplished, well, you'll take that deal, right? So the same thing with staff working as hard as they're working, if they feel like they're not getting the major things done that they want to get done, it makes it hard when we talk about recruitment and retention. We want to keep all these folks. We want to make sure they're invested in their work. We also want to make sure that the work that they're investing in is the priority of the council. So what I would suggest and what we were talking about is basically having some conversation around what is the vision for Oneonta? Where do we want to be in 5, 10, 15 years? And if we determine that as a group, if we get consensus as a group around that, and that's a conversation with your constituents as well, then we can begin to look at all the priorities that we've already got that aren't really prioritized and begin to determine, where the rocks are in this thing. And that may well be something that will be more, appropriately addressed by somebody who's facilitating a conversation, because we all have our favorite rock. We may not know what it is in the moment, but as we go through this, so we may not be able to get ourselves to the, so having somebody kind of facilitate that conversation as he did around our conversation around communications might be a good strategy to move this forward. So my suggestion, this has been a long meeting. My suggestion is that if everybody has now the strategic plan in front of them, they should become, if you're not, become very familiar with what is in that strategic plan. And then we can either determine that we want to have some conversation that is about goals, and we might have a couple of conversations that kind of build off of that. Let's or we decide that what we want to do is connect with this facilitator and see if we can get something scheduled so we're not doing it ourselves, but we're rather being led. So that's what I have, and so have that in terms of discussion on that.
I would like to have a workshop, if you will. I don't think we necessarily need Dick to come back and facilitate it. Think through our previous one, we all understand the guidelines. And I think this council can have a productive workshop, but I would like to see the council have a workshop in the second quarter of this year, early on, given the fact that what Greg just mentioned is that, we need to determine, this council, this legislative body needs to determine at what level can we afford these services.
I agree, and I think it's great how we're changing things up with how we're doing the agenda and the meetings. I think this is big enough that it warrants a special meeting, a workshop, what have you, so we can focus solely on that. Maybe I should speak for, at least that's how I think.
Yes, Scott.
Yeah, I think we're all big people here. I think we can get together in a room and discuss that. I don't think we need to bring somebody else in. The second thing is I think if we wait to the second quarter to try to do this, I think we're gonna be too late for this budget. We got a big gap we gotta fill, deal with this. And we should be having budget discussions probably every meeting that we have. But I'm not gonna bore everybody with that, but I think we should be having that discussion long before the second quarter.
Right. So I don't disagree with you, Scott. I'm thinking that March might be, it's funny to say, it feels like a long ways away, but it's really not. That March might be an appropriate timeline to be either looking at a special meeting of council, might be something that would take I would imagine a few hours of conversation. And I do believe that there needs to be some agreement among council in terms of the direction that we would, take. Essentially, what do we want to get accomplished during that meeting, and what would that look like, and what would be essentially the benchmarks that we'd want to hit before we moved on to the next part of the meeting, so that we don't wind up not addressing something that we really need to. So I think that maybe that there is some work that we could do, and I think volunteering you, Greg, but I think between Greg and I, we can maybe start to generate some correspondence for the council to look at in terms of what that structure might look like for something that might go several hours. It would probably not be one of the first and third Tuesdays, but would probably be a special meeting of council. It would be a public meeting because we would have 8 council members here. So you would be invited to be in attendance if you're interested. So does that sound like a reasonable plan? I mean, again, I just volunteered you, and I know you have nothing to do.
That's all right.
Right, but between the
Maybe.
two of us, we can, begin to put something in the hands of council that we can have some dialogue back and forth on. It's always a risky thing. David, can you hear me? It's always a risky thing because what we're doing is we are presenting something to council, which means that we're having something that looks like a council meeting virtually. So we're not going to be deciding anything so much in this correspondence. David, I'm going to loop you into the correspondence so that if we start to go off the rails, you're able to say as much.
If you have more than a majority of the common council members together and discussing public
We are.
topics, then it's an open meeting.
Right. So I'm gonna ask you to provide all the guidance that you can so that we can have a conversation that doesn't require everybody being in the room over the course of a couple of months, and then we'll see what we can do about finding some time in March to nail this down. The other piece too is that, so the city administrator works for the council, right? So the city administrator is essentially when Greg was talking about, what his goals are and so forth. So he said strategic plan. Right. So, so it's important that, as we are moving forward, that you are as not only conversant with the priorities of the strategic plan, but also, what your expectations, realistic expectations of the city administrator should be because of that. Sound about right? Okay, so I think this is going to be a short conversation for our topic of interest, but you guys had the topic of interest. We just moved it forward in the meeting. So if there's nothing else that we want to talk about here, is there? Then I would ask, do we have any additional business or anything for council consideration? Yes, Katie.
Oh, you can go first. I have a couple things.
No, okay, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to report that I have seen a draft of the climate assessment for the city of Oneonta, that has been recently written up. And I'm wondering about the process. There's 2 components to it, and one is more finished than the other. And I'm wondering about the author wanted to find out about having that approved, the second portion of the assessment approved by council, or sort of what the process.
So this would be something, and anybody who wants to jump in, but this would be something in my understanding that would bring to the discussion agenda. There may be a presentation that you'd want to make or that should be made so that the council is informed. And then from that discussion, we would probably find our next action item.
Okay.
Okay.
Put it forward.
Yes, I would say, yeah, and we can literally put it on the discussion agenda even as early as next week, next meeting.
Next meeting.
Yes, February 6th. Katie?
Okay, I have some things from the Parks Commission that I said that I would follow up on. So let's see, sorry. It was reported that a pole was hit by a bus in Miwa Park, by Damaski Fields. and that the situation is going to be repaired, but the, commission had concerns about who, like, the responsible party would be for repairing the pole. I was thinking it's like a light pole.
It's on,
Yeah.
it's on the city,
Is it? Okay. And is that something that insurance would cover?
that's correct.
Okay.
Their insurance, not ours.
Oh, okay, there.
We're gonna fix it, then we're gonna bill.
Okay, good to know. Also, they were questioning as a result of that, because of the increased bus traffic, how long the temporary bus station, we might expect that to be in Damascus lot.
Until the new transit hub is constructed and open.
So like a couple of years.
So I would think in 2025 at some point during
Okay.
that year, that would be open,
Okay,
probably
thank you.
mid to late.
I've had some folks reach out to me on that. By the way, I don't think I've talked to you about it, Craig, I'm sorry, but there is a concern for people who are waiting there, and don't have shelter. So I don't know if there's something that we can start, it's gonna be there that length of time, I think. We might want to consider ensuring that people aren't just sitting there in the rain or the snow.
Yeah, there is the interior lobby area, but when there's not a Trailways representative there, then that becomes a problem. Yeah, we can talk with them about that.
I mean, so the commission was talking about like what potential other locations might be. Is that something that, we could even look at other places that exist?
I mean, we talked about what other locations might work. This would seem to be the best one, given bus circulation and a location on city property. If Trailways were looking to go elsewhere, that'd be a different story. And if there's another suggestion, we can consider that. Obviously, there'd be a potentially considerable expense, depending if it's a leasing
Right.
space or what it is, but yeah, this is a topic of discussion with Trailways, and we all agree on this being the best location.
Okay.
Is there
Yeah.
a specific location that was mentioned, or?
I don't have it here, so I'm gonna just follow up with them and try to compile a list of suggestions, and then, if it's something that, because obviously building a shelter will also cost something, so, if we were to do that, so just evaluating our options at this point, especially one of the concerns that was raised about it being there. I mean, it's short term, I guess, in the grand scheme of things, but is the congestion in the summertime when there are like baseball games and things with Trailways buses going in there, so it might not hurt to consider other locations if we can get some suggestions from the commission and let the chairs here, so I have multiple memory going on, which is good. Okay, the other thing was about hazardous tree removal. The commission was hoping that we could get a map of where the hazardous trees were in the parks specifically. And then also there was a question about the stumps. That grinding is gonna be done in the spring. Is that done by the city or by the contractor?
So the first question, I have a map already prepared, share that with you.
Cool, thank you.
And the stumps are the responsibility of the contractor, part of this contract, to remove those stumps.
Okay, so they're gonna come back in spring to that. Okay,
But
perfect.
they have 6 months to complete their contract, but they're gonna come back in springtime.
Okay, cool. So those were my questions about parks. Does anyone else have anything that they want to say so that I don't suck up all the air in the meeting for the next 20
You
minutes?
just keep rolling.
No,
and then-
Scott has something.
Please,
Go ahead.
yeah, just keep rolling.
Okay, kind of on that note, I was also on the email that Luke had referenced earlier about the timber contract. This constituent had asked if some of the profits from the timber sale could be set aside to create some sort of grant type thing for homeowners to be able to help them mitigate the cost of removing Norway maples on their private property, because this is, no?
Unless we establish if.
Cause it's like the lead service line thing, right? I mean,
Trees aren't exactly equivalent to lead service. Lead service kills people.
okay,
Norway maple just don't shed their leaves until it really dries. So
okay.
it's.
Tell me your
The-
concerns.
The answer is probably not, because it would be for the benefit of specific property owners for truly not.
Well, I think this person was expecting the trees to be deemed hazardous, not just desired on, like
Hazardous.
under the same.
Hazardous means likely to fall and hurt people.
Right,
Unfortunately, Norway maples are wonderfully strong and vigorous and just keep growing higher and higher. So probably using general taxpayers' money to benefit particular individuals who want to take out healthy trees because they don't like them would probably be violative of public gifts to private persons.
okay, well, I appreciate it.
That's my, I could look at it further, but it's really sort of like landscaping.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I mean, we
It would be,
We
it
don't
would
even
be a
subsidize,
relatively
we
small
don't
benefit.
subsidize
for the
dangerous trees on private property. We only subsidize dangerous trees that are gonna fall on people's heads in public.
Right.
And into them, and then we charge the private property owners if they don't do it, so. Probably.
Okay, it sounds like it would be an enormous amount of effort anyway for probably a very small number.
There'd have to be an application, there'd have to be determination, there'd have to be someone who made a determination as to whether that was appropriate expenditure function.
Right, okay, all right, well, I'm happy to report that back to the consultant, so I appreciate that.
Hey, that might be something something like that is the type of thing we would discuss as part of the strategic plan. Is it a new service that we want to add? Is it worth the expense and what are we not doing to be able to do it? That sort of thing.
Yeah,
Not
cool, well, that was
Specifically, but.
kind of
something
what
like
my
that.
question was gonna be, was like, okay, so we don't have like a finance committee anymore, so what do we do? So
There it goes.
bring it here, lovely.
Jenny hadn't maybe
Oh,
thought
yeah.
on that.
We
I
cannot,
know.
we cannot disperse funds to private property.
Okay.
That is our constitution. So David, I was trying to get your eye, but just, we cannot,
No.
unless we have a grant program.
Well, that's-
We're,
By the state.
Okay,
You
so,
say- we sometimes have disagreement on that because what is private benefit and what's public benefit that, when someone has a hole in front of their house, there are sometimes when we plow a street, that's private benefit for people that are on the street. It doesn't benefit anybody else except the people that's on the street, so
We don't plow private streets.
we do not plow private streets, but we repair.
So I think we may have exhausted this one. Anything else you got there,
Okay.
Katie?
thank you, yes, one other thing,
This is
which
Katie's fault, let's go.
is really, yeah, I'm sort of notorious for that. So, one other thing that I wanted to, and I hope that I'm doing this correctly, Mark, because you had kind of wanted to bring things to the council to see if there was general interest before things go to the committee, but Community Wellness Committee is gonna be meeting next week. And there was a change recently in the availability of healthcare, in our community. There have actually been several. One that I don't know, which is the closing of UHS, that we would have any, potential of reversing, but the other one is that, Excelis and WellNow are no longer partnering. And what I was hoping was that the council would be in favor of, writing a shared letter of support for them finding a solution that would benefit our community, without raising rates for our residents to be able to, have WellNow again be an in-network provider for Excelis Blue Cross Blue Shield. So if it's something that you all think that is worth submitting a letter to those agencies and potentially the state legislature, that would be great, then we can work on it, Community Wellness Committee, we can bring it back here, we can all agree to sign it. If not, I'll just write one myself, but I thought I would just. bring it here.
Does anyone have any reason that is not something the Community Wellness Committee might engage in?
Can I
So,
mention something to you that might be relevant?
After the meeting, I'd love to talk about it. No, after the meeting, I would love to talk about it.
sorry, Denise, sorry.
Well, now treats veterans.
You got it in.
I'll write it down.
So the council's consensus is that, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we'll put that on our community wellness agenda.
Can I follow up with a question?
Sure.
If it's, so it's. You, so for obvious, yes, I'm for continuing that partnership. When you said it would go to the state, is there, are you thinking of a I guess at one point, the point we go for the state.
Yeah, so basically just to urge them to, well, no, I don't wanna speak on it too much, but my understanding is that the state has some sway in terms of the rates that are set for reimbursement, so, yeah.
But obviously, prior to anything being written, you will have researched all of
Researched all
that,
of
so,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
good. All right, anything else, Katie?
No, thank you very much.
Len?
I'd like to take Greg up on the offer to tour the water treatment plant.
All right, nice.
I was reading. I'd like to get an update on the LDC. That's it.
Right, well, the LDC, we can probably have, a conversation around in the funding, stream conversation, which should be, maybe 3 meetings from now. I can tell you though, that there's not been a whole lot of progress. We all got kind of sidetracked with it, to be quite honest. So, where are we at with it right now? We've gone back to the lawyers?
Right, we've gotten some drafts, some language from the attorneys that we had hired on the next steps in developing this, but for me, this goes back to our strategic plan and there's kind of 2 parts to that discussion. There's what are we actually prioritizing? And there's also what is the process for changing priorities and setting and changing priorities. This was something that came up in a committee discussion last year, mid-year. It wasn't something that was already in the strategic plan. It was in the comprehensive plan as an idea, a philosophical thing, but it wasn't something that was established as a priority. So we kind of took it on and said, okay, let's do this. And then the parking garage was closed and another thing happened, So it's one of those things that, as Mayor said, kind of fell by the wayside because we don't have an established list of a council and staff on the same page. What are our priorities and our goals? When we have too much to do in a given day and too many things to try to do, we need to be able to prioritize. And that's where that type of discussion, I think, will help. We'll know, is the LDC now taking priority over something else? And what is that? And then the other question for me with the LDC is, what are we trying to do with it?
Right.
Our goal seemed to be, let's establish this and then figure it out. And when we talk with the attorneys, that's not really what you should figure out. What are you trying to do with it? And then establish it accordingly. So that was still a question, and I think we need to have more discussion about it.
So kind of, I'm 99% with you, but not 100%. The idea of the LDC in my mind's eye, because I was pushing for it hard, because I had a whole nother thing that I wanted to do with it. And basically, I've made this metaphor has been beaten to death. So my apologies to those who have to listen to me more often than others. But I look at it as being a tool in the toolbox. And, a hammer is good for hammering things, but you don't want to, turn the screw with it. So what do you use this for? So it's when you need a hammer, it's good to have one in the toolbox. You need to know what this tool is for. I think there's value within the conversation around funding to have some dialogue around how can an LDC be used and what would, potentially a tool like that, how could that be used? And so I think it's also that would then inform the strategic plan in terms of how would we then prioritize its use if in fact we do.
I'd like to catch up to you guys if you would share the information from the lawyers. I'd appreciate that.
We can do that, sure. Yeah. In fact, we can share it with all council. There's something. No reason not. Scott.
I'm gonna make it quick here, but first of all, I just want to say, seeing George's, I think people watch how I vote. I don't always vote the way with something I agree with, or I disagree with. I vote with the way the residents want me to. I think I made that pretty evident in my last 4 years. It's gonna continue this 4 years. And my second thing is I had somebody call me today, had a good conversation, doesn't live in my ward, but brought up some interesting points that I forgot about, everything that was going on. Let's talk about roundabout for a minute. Where do we stand? Where does the state stand? What's going on with this? Is there any movement with it? Is it kind of dead in the water?
It's not dead in the water. We're looking to schedule a sit down with the DOT. We're still waiting for them to get back to us. Is that right?
Yeah, we should be hearing back from them next week because someone's on the office has to, hopefully in the next week or two, having an internal meeting about that. And then we had discussed there was discussion about having another public meeting at some point, but we have questions, concerns that we want to discuss with them as the next step.
That's, I mean, I know I have concerns and stuff that I like to ask the DOT, especially with the design, how some of the designs are. And stuff like that, and also, with Lettuce Highway, with the sidewalk and stuff like that, how are we progressing with our Lettuce Highway stuff that was voted on this council?
And currently, at this point, so our consultant has been working on the Lettuce Highway analysis, done some initial traffic counts, data collection, traffic analysis, and having that meeting with DOT will be not only about the roundabout, but about the Lettuce Highway piece as well. So that'll kind of help. Obviously, they're inextricably linked, those two projects, what happens there, so we need to move forward together.
And then
So-
the public will have an opportunity to speak at one of these meetings with us.
Yeah. Yeah, the meetings I'm talking about are internal, but then eventually having a public meeting, yeah.
Yeah, and then the internal meetings have been informed by a lot of the conversations that have already taken place, and some of the observations that Greg and I have had around the DOT's preference to be moving vehicles, whereas my preference would be to be moving pedestrians more safely. So there's a conversation that we need to have, the DOT and the city, around some of the mechanics of what that looks like. And if we can make that happen relatively soon, and I think we should be able to make that happen relatively soon, it wouldn't be much longer beyond that we'd have them in front of council and in front of the community.
I think that was all the questions. I left my voice at work.
Right. Everybody doesn't have to have something, just so you know, Bryce, but if you do.
I just have a minor thing. I
Sure.
Went up to Hartwick College. Thank you, Mary Drenick, and I know Hartwick. It was great to see you there too. Went to an event for a scholarship with local high school students in the area, kind of talking about the future of politics and suggestions, and also Hartwick College students attended, and just very interesting viewpoints, and talked to a lot of students, connected with some students.
So that's something that, Luke, I'll connect you with. There were some students talking about some diversity initiatives, so I know with the board, I'll talk to you privately and just go over that, because they were talking about Black History Month, right, with February. Usually in the past in Oneonta, I've been on the NAACP, I'm still a member. We've done stuff that's got approved by the city, so I know it is a topic. But I know with conversations of retention and recruitment, we really don't celebrate Black History Month. We don't celebrate Hispanic History Month on our main streets. We don't really think about other cultures other than the basic norm. So it's just stuff as we have more students and have more people coming from Bassick, Springbrook, all these employers coming in, just something we have to be mindful about. So it's nice to hear from the youth, kind of given the future. And you got they told me clearly that they want us to come to them and market to them. You know, they're kind of in the technology future. So it was a really cool conversation to have, and I think that's really good to tap into our colleges and our high schools around the area, because they're going to come to our downtowns, but we got to do some marketing.
It's terrific. Anybody else? Okay, we actually do have need for a very short executive session, and if I could get executive session for contract, to discuss contract, if I could get a motion from A. All right, you got that? All in favor? Aye. So again, to the community that was here, thank you so